Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the August 19th, 2024 South Burlington City Council meeting. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Elizabeth, would you lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item number 2, instructions on exiting building in case of an emergency and review of technology options. Jesse Baker, City Manager.
Thank you. So for those joining us in the room, thank you for being here in the room. If there's an emergency, you can go out either to the left or the right of the rear of the auditorium and then turn left or right to get outside. For those participating remotely, thank you for joining us as well. If you'd like to speak during any item on your agenda, please turn your camera on and the chair will call on you. Or you can indicate your interest in speaking in the chat and I will have the chair call on you. Other than that, we are not monitoring the chat for content.
Thank you, Jesse. Item 3, agenda review. Does anybody have any additions, deletions, or changes in the order of the agenda items tonight? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 4, which is comments and questions from the public not related to tonight's agenda. Are there any in the audience or online? No comments? Okay. Last chance? All right. Moving on to item number 5, which is councilors' announcements and reports on committee assignments and the city manager's report. Elizabeth, would you like to start this week?
I can start and I'll be brief. I've been on vacation, so I have nothing to report.
Andrew?
Following in good stead, I was in Maine helping my son build a cabin. So I too have nothing to report.
Lori?
I don't have any committee updates tonight, but I do want to say that Andrew and I will be doing a coffee with the counselor Saturday morning and hope that anybody online or in the audience will come join us and give us wanted feedback.
Where will that be?
That will be at Champlain College, Champlain School. Chamberlain, excuse me, at Chamberlain School at 9 o'clock Saturday morning. I'm thinking college. I'm confused. I will be missing tomorrow night's meeting, so I wanted people to know that. And I just wanted to say that I spent a lot of time at the polls last week for the primaries, and it was very slow. It was the lowest turnout in over a decade, and hopefully that will be different than that this coming November. And other than that, on to you.
Thank you. I believe that the turnout will be a little bit heavier than it was for the primary, speaking from experience. So glad to know you worked on the election. Did either of you two work the election last week? No. So you didn't put in the 14 hours normal, but you put in probably 14 hours, right?
15
hours. You beat me by an hour. What took you so long to sum up the tabulator?
I'm a newbie. You've been doing this for years.
I'll just say with 5 elections in a year, everyone will have lots of opportunities.
It was a heavy year. So I also worked the election, and I was here at City Hall my first time in a long time, and first time I ever worked here, but first time not working at Chamberlain in probably 3 or 4 years, and so it was an interesting change. And it also was light turnout, but we summed up pretty quickly, and we were the first to report back. Hopefully, I think we were accurate. I think we were. And at the same time, from 4 to 6, there was a retirement party for Catherine Plageman, a longtime librarian at the library. And so I was able to slip in there quickly and secure some chocolate cake for the other election officials in my precinct and congratulate her. I attended the City Green meeting where the consultants offered their vision of possible sites in the city where a green could be established. I also went to the Tuttle dinner that they had last, I think it was Wednesday or the Wednesday before. It was the Wednesday 2 weeks ago. And excellent, delicious barbecue chicken meal with salad at the Tuttle, prepared by the The South Burlington School District cafeteria employees, really good meal. Wasn't well attended, but I sat down and talked with several people, and I thought I had one person that I could pull for a committee application, which would have been really great. Tried to talk them into that. I attended the night out, and Barbie and Bones was performing. Good band, lots of good cover tunes. And I just want to make people aware that Mike Scanlon is not joining us tonight, correct? And he will not be joining us tomorrow either. Do you remember what he said?
He may arrive, but he'll be a little late
He'll be a
because
little
that
late.
meeting starts at 4.
Okay, great. Other than that, that's all I have to report. Jesse?
Great, thank you. So I have a number of things to share. Bennett, do you know we've lost this confidence monitor now too? We've lost this confidence monitor too, just FYI. So a couple of things to share. One, just Tim and I attended our monthly city school meeting this afternoon and wanted to had a bit of a scheduling conversation about the steering committee. So as the council knows, the steering committee meeting is September 18th. That's the quarterly meeting of the school board and the city council together. That will take place at 6 o'clock, not 6:30. We're updating your calendars. I'm assuming you all can make that work, I hope. And that will take place at the school district in the room where the school board meets. I'll remind you again about that, but want you to get that on your calendars. This week, we're having an information session with city staff and Rick Marcotte staff about City Center. The principal, Alyssa, was able to build that into their in-service training. We'll be here at City Hall, an opportunity for staff to really understand what's happening in City Center, what they can expect in the months and years to come. And we're really thankful for the school's partnership on that. Since I started, there was a priority for new Welcome to South Burlington signs. So if anyone has seen those recently, there are 2 new Welcome to South Burlington signs on Williston Road and Shelburne Road. So keep your eyes out for those. As the chair mentioned, we had a City Green presentation on Wednesday with about, oh good, it's back, thank you, with about 20 folks here in the room. We are working on putting that presentation also up online so people can provide online feedback to the 2 spots identified, and then anticipate that the consultant will come to you in October with their findings and recommendations. Next week, we are hosting here in this room town managers and police and fire chiefs from across the county to have a briefing from UVM Medical Center and the Howard Center on the new mental health urgent care center that they are opening in Burlington. This is something that the chiefs and the managers have been talking about for years, will be a huge asset to our neighbors as they're in crisis to hopefully keep them out of the emergency department, but receiving services that are really critical to everyone's health and well-being. So big win for our community, and we're pleased to host them here. A few recreation updates. Thursday night is our last SB night out of the summer. Hopefully it doesn't rain and folks can come out to that. Our Park Hop Brews series, which will be Thursday nights through September at different parks throughout the city, kicks off on September 5th here at Goose Park. Really framing that as a way to welcome our new neighbors to City Center, especially the folks that have moved in the last 2 months, but also invite everybody else to join us in City Center. Just a reminder that we are meeting tomorrow at 4 and Wednesday at 6:30 to interview committee candidates. And then finally, I did want to share an update with the community on the long drive discussions that have been happening. So I have a statement. I'm going to just read through it, so bear with me for a little bit. So the council and I wanted to share additional information about a recent decision that I made concerning potential noise associated with construction along Long Drive. We wanted to share this information in the interest of transparency and also following up on community members' conversations. So in our city charter, which is our governance document, our constitution as a city, and is state statute, it states, quote, "The manager shall be responsible for the enforcement of all city laws and ordinances." In the summer of 2023, a family was building a new home on Long Drive. During this construction, the contractor used a jackhammer for an extended period of time to dislodge rock ledge. This did follow jackhammering for infrastructure to serve this new neighborhood for the 2 prior summers. This property and several others along Long Drive are the subject of several decades of permitting and court action. A decision by the environmental court puts very strict parameters on what the city, through the DRB review process, can consider when permitting new construction in this area. In the fall of 2023, neighbors voiced their discontent with the jackhammering and construction noises at this parcel. Following that city council meeting, the city attorney and I started the process of filing an injunction in court due to the prolonged and incessant noise viewed as a violation of the nuisance ordinance. The court declined to issue a stop work order based on the information provided by the city and by the neighbors, and instead set a date for all parties, including the applicant, to submit evidence approximately 10 days later. Before this could be heard by the judge, that phase of construction was complete and the jackhammering stopped. In the winter of 2024, another family pulled permits to construct a home on Long Drive. Based on our previous experience and with the goodwill of the contractor and the property owner, and very importantly, wanting to limit the liability to the city and to the taxpayers of South Burlington, we had many conversations with the parties about their plans. Test pits were completed to understand the extent of the ledge on the property, and where likely the need to remove ledge was minimized in the plans within the parameters of the prior court orders, and the zoning permit was granted, allowing the property owners their property rights to develop. We did not believe we had the legal ability to prohibit all jackhammering, and we have a duty to protect the city from liability. So with the partnership of the contractor, I made the decision to enter into a very specific agreement with the contractor to limit the impact on the community and to prevent violations of the noise ordinance. If I had not entered into this agreement and there were egregious jackhammering, our solution would have been to enforce the noise ordinance through fines and an injunction. So let me walk you through those two paths. Without this agreement in place, and if excessive and prolonged jackhammering had taken place, the city attorney was prepared to file an injunction with the court, seeking to stop the contractor from continuing work in such a manner. It is likely, based on our knowledge of the court process, that this would have taken between 8 and 12 days to be heard, and there's no guarantee that a judge would have found that jackhammering for construction of a home was prohibited. Meanwhile, I could have assessed daily fines starting at $160 a day and going up to a maximum of $800 a day on the 5th day and continuing at that rate. With the agreement that I entered into, the contractor agreed to limit jackhammering to 3 days with time restrictions, to notify neighbors in advance and offer to pay for them to relocate, and importantly, imposed a $10,000 a day fine if jackhammering continued. I believe this was a better deal for the neighbors and a better deal for the community. It also limited the potential of several lawsuits the city could face. The contractor, having signed this agreement, put the city in a much stronger legal position if the contract was breached. In the end, ledge was not found, and the neighbor was able to build their home this summer without having to jackhammer. We are aware that there are additional house sites along Long Drive and are continuing to work with the property owners and contractors and are prepared to enforce our ordinances and regulations as necessary. And that's all I have for you tonight.
Thank you very much, Jesse. Moving on to item number 6, which is the consent agenda, and it's fairly long, so I'm just going to go read the whole thing. Item A, consider and sign disbursements. Item B, approve resolution 2024-19 adopting the South Burlington, Vermont Municipal Informational and Guidance Sign System. Item C, approve the selection of CRO Planning and Design to complete the Parks and Open Space Master Plan and authorize the city manager to execute a contract with them. Item D, approve resolution 2024-17 updating the city's ambulance fees. Item E, receive an update on efforts around the intersection of Market Street and the Rick Marcotte Central School Access Road to ensure the needs and safety of all users are met. Item F, accept easements with Investors Corporation of Vermont for the Kennedy Drive Stormwater Pond number 7. Item G, accept easements with Treetop Park Association Incorporated for the Kennedy Drive Stormwater Pond number 7. Item H, approve and authorize the city council chair to sign the documents related to loan RF 13532.0 to support the Airport Parkway Solids Handling Improvement Project. So those are our consent agenda items. Can I have a motion to approve them?
Move to approve the consent agenda.
I have a question on item C.
Item C. Okay, do you,
Can you second it and then have discussion?
yeah.
Okay, so I second.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there other discussion? Would you like to talk about item C?
I would like to talk about item C.
Item C is the CRO planning and design contract, right?
And I don't know if this is the right place to do this, but in the project and the task list, one thing that we have requested that I do not see in this task list is coordinating this plan with the active transportation plan. And somewhere in here, I think that there needs to be notation that this plan will be done in conjunction with the active transportation plan, so that when we have our parks plan, our transportation plan coordinates with it, and we end up having paths to get to it. So I just wanted to add that.
Okay. Somebody's sitting in front of us that probably wants to speak to this subject matter. Would you like to comment and identify yourself?
Yeah.
Hi,
introduce yourself.
I'm Silken Kirshner. I am the project manager for transportation and open spaces. We did include mention of the active transportation plan in coordination with that in our original presentation to you guys, and that was included in the RFP we put out. It just might not have been in CRO's RFP that they submitted, but that is our intent to incorporate that active transportation plan in everything we do.
I know we've talked about it, I just wanted to make sure that it
Make sure it
didn't
gets in
fall
there.
off the list.
Totally. Put a note on my computer and we're all set.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Are there any other discussions or items you want to discuss on these?
Can I clarify also on item C? I had asked a question about the selection process, and it was clarified to me that part of the selection process was not outsourcing some of the activities of the Parks and Open Space Master Plan. But as I did review the selected vendor, there is outsourcing to Siteform Studio and to Stantec. So could I just get clarification on whether that's considered outsourcing or I don't know what the word would be on that, but because that was selection criteria, it wasn't clear to me.
Yes, so
Thanks.
the Siteform Studio, I believe, is how they're going to assemble graphics and everything. So that's more of a graphic design, which isn't something an engineering consultant would have in-house. So that was like a positive, meaning we'll get better graphics and designs for our actual plan and what we put out to the city. And the other one you said was the outsourcing of Stantec. They are going to come in as a certified PE who can do more in-depth engineering design than what I believe CRO is capable of doing in-house. Whereas the other two that submitted, one had shopped out the entire open space half and separated the open space from the Parks and Rec entirely, with one half being in-house and one half being shopped out. And the third person who submitted, they shopped out the public outreach. So in our mind, I believe the graphics was a positive thing to see shopped out, and it was nice to see that they had engineering support from Stantec if needed, but it's not something I expect to really affect the project as much as the other two had shopped out. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We have a motion and a second. Are we ready for the vote?
Ready?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So it's unanimous.
I just want to point out with all these agenda items, we have 7 folks from Public Works here tonight with all of their great work they have done over the summer, getting all of these agenda items ready to go for you. Thank you
I'd-
all very much.
I'd also like to acknowledge all the work done to clear all the paths after the Friday night windstorm that we had a week ago. I know that the path from Overlook Park through Szymanski to Farrell had several trees down. One of the really big ones that I saw also had an active beehive that was exposed, and so some community member was able to find a beekeeper who came and brought a box and found the queen and stuck it in there and sucked all the bees in the hive and took it away. And so that danger was removed. And so if you take a ride on the bike paths, you'll see some very large trees that just went like this. And if you just travel around the area, you'll see a lot of trees that are broken. One of the biggest ones I saw was behind St. Joseph's on Archibald Street in the Old North End, and also in the cemetery adjacent to that property. There was a really large willow tree that just cracked in half and went down. And actually, it moved the monument that was on a granite base. It shifted it about 6 inches when the branch came down and hit it, and it just shoved it over. Like, that's a lot of weight and power. So. All right, we're moving on to item number 7, which says a public hearing warned for 7. It's not 7 o'clock yet. Would we want it?
Goodness.
I'm sorry we're going so fast. Is Helen on yet? Helen is not on yet. Helen really is going to give a report on the airport commission. But
May I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Number 9, which is potential action on a stormwater credit manual, we haven't talked about that a whole lot during this public hearing process. They could brief you on that, what that is, then table it and come back to it after, if you choose to adopt the ordinance.
Okay. Let's move to, we're going to move down to item number 9, which is potential action resolution 2014-18 to adopt stormwater credit manual as presented. Marissa Urabaugh, the stormwater superintendent, is she? Come on down. Your time is now.
Sorry, team.
Hey,
Juggling
folks.
you up.
I'll just get us rolling here. So, Tom DePietro, Public Works Director for the city. I'll walk you through this, but Maurice also here in case there's some more detailed questions she can help answer. So what this is, so after we approve the stormwater ordinance, we need to reestablish our credit policies. A little bit of history, which would have been in the presentation, but or not discussion before, but I'll go over here. So, we pulled in our stormwater and wastewater ordinance. It was all one PDF document, right? And we had it all together. And that, in the stormwater portion of that, indicated that we have to have a credit manual developed. That wasn't intended to be adopted as ordinance. That was just a policy manual that the ordinance required us to have. The city switched over to a Muni code system, where now all of our ordinances are in one nice big document in one place, which is great. But that inadvertently got pulled in at the time. So when you go and approve the stormwater and sewer ordinance, presumably, either tonight or in the future, we still need to have the credit manual resolution so that we still have our credit policy for stormwater. So that's what this item is presumably after that, those items are approved in ordinance. We would come back. There's, I think, very few or minimal changes to the credit manual, almost none. We just need a clean document and a clean resolution from council to continue with current policy.
And I think I saw in an email earlier that the total of those credits are like in the $50,000, $60,000 range, and there are just a couple of properties that take up most of that.
That's true. It's quite minimal uptake. It's available to everyone. There's a review process. Generally speaking, if folks have a state stormwater permit, they are eligible for some credits. They just have to submit that same information. But even so, we don't see a lot of credit applications.
So does the council have any other questions about this? So we can't really vote on this resolution until after we take action. So, okay, but at least we bought some time doing that. 5 minutes, okay. Is there anything else? No, we got to discuss possibly receiving a pick. No, we're not going to.
Would the chair like us to start our presentation about the ordinance, and then you can have the public hearing warned at 7, or would you prefer we do the presentation at 7? Is it warned separate?
We could. You have a half an hour allocated for item 11. That's not short at all. Nothing is short on here since then. Okay, except for no, we don't do ARPA guidance.
I can talk about ARPA.
You can talk about it?
Sure.
Sure, why not? Talk away.
So in your packet is a memo from Martha Machar. Martha is on vacation, very well deserved today. So as you have heard me say before, the U.S. Treasury guidance has changed to require not just council action to allocate funds by December 2024, but actually being under contract for work by December 24, which is a much higher administrative burden. And I think it's really intended to ensure dollars stay in communities and not get pulled back into the U.S. Treasury. So we certainly want to make best use of those dollars. So an option for you to consider, and we've laid it out as a motion, but you certainly can have additional conversation, is you have about $1.7 million left to allocate of the 5.6 million the city was initially awarded. Interestingly, the guidance from Treasury does not now include the interest as things we have to allocate. So the 410,000 we've earned on interest from that 5.6 million will stay in your ability to spend at any time. So our recommendation, in order to address all the other priorities you have in the next couple of months and not try and cram in a bunch of contracting really fast, is for you to allocate the 1.7 million to existing capital projects as identified and contracted in the FY25 municipal budget, and therefore create an intended surplus in the FY25 budget in the general fund that then you can use at any time and allocate in any way that you deem fit in the years to come. So it's a accounting technique that is approved by the federal government that allows you to prioritize projects that you have already said as a community we want to do, and use the dollars in those ways.
Does the 1.7 include the interest?
No,
No. So there's another
another 410,000.
$10,000.
410.
$410,000 on top of the 1.7 that is free and clear
Free and
of any
clear.
strings about how it's allocated. Doesn't have to be allocated.
Exactly.
Wow.
The only
No, but of that amount, we've kind of indicated that we want to allocate 900 or of it or so already, right?
how we want to allocate.
Right?
Of the 1.7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But my understanding, if we do what's proposed, we would then have the flexibility to allocate these funds at any time in the future to a project that we've already been considering for the ARPA funds. And this
Correct.
just gives us time to go through that process. Is there any downside to doing this?
I mean, I think the downside to doing it is the transformational nature of these dollars for specific projects in the city. But it's an accounting tool that lets you get to future transformational projects and not potentially risk the loss of the money to the federal government.
Can I ask a clarifying question? When you say we have the flexibility, is it to reallocate the dollars associated with these identified FY25 projects, or it's utilizing the surplus that's created?
If I'm understanding your question, it would be directing us to use ARPA funds to fund FY25 approved capital projects. And therefore, you would be creating an FY25 surplus. So the general fund dollars that we're raising this year to pay for those capital projects, we would not be using for that purpose. We would be using ARPA funds for that purpose. And therefore, the general fund dollars would be moved into fund balance, an intentional surplus for you to allocate at any time in the future.
So that does answer the question. It's not that we have the flexibility to redeploy these dollars from capital projects that are in the plan for F25. It's the potential to deploy the surplus that's created
In the
to
future.
other projects. So I guess the upshot of that is if we haven't gone through a budgeting process yet, so not knowing yet what the demand might be from the taxpayer in FY25 in aggregate, it isn't necessarily saying that surplus is going to exist, because it could be deployed to pay the tax rate down, for instance, too, as well.
It could, yes.
Okay.
It couldn't be used to pay down the tax rate in FY25 because that tax rate's already established. It could be used to pay down the tax rate in FY26. You could use one-time money in FY26 to buy down the tax rate.
Okay. Yeah, I just want to clarify that it's creating a surplus, but it isn't necessarily going to. The purpose of it isn't decided at this point.
Exactly. The real positive of this administrative action is it gives you more time to make prudent financial decisions with the dollars.
In our motion, can we specify that our intention is to have that surplus spent as we would have spent the ARPA dollars? So that we reserve the right to not have it be used for paying down taxes, et cetera, or is that not possible? I like the idea of doing this, but I want to reserve the money for what it is intended for. And this is just giving us time to do that. Is there a way we can, in this motion, clarify what our intention is?
Do you mean like making sure that current budget dollars for FY25 are directed into a special pseudo post ARPA account, dollar for dollar?
That these $1.7 million get put into a pseudo account
Right,
for
right.
for
So it's
the intention.
designated, so we know
Exactly.
that's, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So from an accounting perspective, that is how we would track it. We would track the general fund dollars that were intended for capital projects and the surplus within that fund because the ARPA money was coming in as a revenue to that fund.
Right.
I think you could make a motion to that effect. It would be a self-controlling motion. You could always change that motion in the future.
Right.
Lori,
just
I
didn't know if that would address your concerns,
make a
Elizabeth.
comment.
Sure.
Yeah, I would be reluctant to put conditions on that now,
Okay.
only because the origin of this conversation was around the ARPA dollars, and now we have additional information about what the requirements are to maintain those from a federal standpoint. So we have the recommendation of the city to put these toward identified capital projects that are in the plan. But I think to start to go down the path of pre-allocating when we aren't really in the budget season yet is a little premature. I mean, I feel comfortable with this, but I also think we anticipated being in a dialogue where we were going to be prioritizing a laundry list of other projects that I hope many of those will be funded, but I think we have the tough decisions and deliberation in front of us.
Are we sure that those CIP projects can be executed in time to the new regulations?
We are, because Martha's very talented. So she has purposely written it like this with the projects called out, but not specific dollars associated, to ensure that between now and December, and then when we report in April, we can use up every dollar of it with contracted projects. We believe that the fire truck, the ambulance, the paving, the alerting system, and the intersection will all be under contract by then. But say hypothetically we learn in November that the ambulance won't be delivered until after December 2026, i.e. not qualifying for ARPA, we can realign paving money to that purpose.
Okay. Sorry, my program froze up here. Okay, good. Okay, so do you want to come back to this discussion later?
Can we move on it now?
We can. Is that the desire of the council to? So you need a motion to approve this? Is there?
I move to allocate the remaining $1,710,913 of obligated ARPA funds to current contracted capital improvement plan projects items as outlined in the foregoing memo in order to meet the ARPA obligation requirements.
Second.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? I have just one comment. This kind of satisfies what you were requesting several months ago about wanting to be able to sort of
flexible.
play an accounting game with the general fund. And
Exactly right.
Yeah, it increases flexibility. So I just want to recognize that.
Thank you.
So we motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So now we'll move back to item 7, which is a public hearing to hold a third reading and second public hearing on an update to the sewer and stormwater ordinance. We have David Wheeler, Water Resources Engineer, and, Tom DiPietro's here, but Marissa's supposed to be there, but that's okay. We'll just take who's there. Good evening.
Good evening, everybody. Tom DiPietro, Director of Public Works. You've heard this presentation from Dave twice already, so we thought we'd mix it up, and I'd run through the slides this evening. This is our second public hearing, but third meeting on updates to the wastewater and stormwater city ordinance. So again, just a couple of slides and then some recommended actions, and then part of that will recommend that council open this up for kind of public comment, public hearing portion of the meeting. So I'm going to start with the sanitary sewer ordinance, and then I'll go through the stormwater ordinance, and then we can have the public hearing on both pieces. So the sanitary sewer ordinance basically establishes the regulations by which we manage our wastewater system. It was last updated in 2021. And like I said, you've seen this is the third time that these are in front of you, these changes. So there's 5 bullets here of kind of the big changes, the significant changes, and I'll run through each of these in turn in the next couple of slides, but this is summarized for everybody. The first one is the sewer service area. So Act 47 required the city establish both drinking water and wastewater service areas. So we've talked about this quite a bit between these meetings and the multiple drinking water ordinance hearings. So these maps are identical, but for the fact that areas above 430 feet in elevation are included in the sewer service area. So again, we have a limitation there with the drinking water because we need to have the appropriate minimum water pressure. We don't have that same limitation with wastewater because it'll flow downhill. So higher areas are easier. And it just establishes that anybody within this area is required to connect to the city system. Clarifies that failed in-ground systems also must connect if they're within the area. And that's the gist of the service area map. I think everybody's familiar with it at this point. The other change here is related to meters for wastewater only customers. So when we bill for drinking water and wastewater, we do it with 1 meter. So it's based on what goes through the drinking water meter. We have a variety of customers in the city that have their drinking water supplied through other sources, whether a private well or another system. And in those cases, we would typically have a meter on the drinking water system so we could bill them for wastewater. The current ordinance indicates that everybody must be connected. Through recent work we did on a rate study, we learned it's actually not the case, or that everybody has to have a water meter. We learned that was not the case for around 80 folks in the city, primarily down in Queen City Park area, because they have their own water system down there. So what we've proposed within this update to the ordinance is to leave that requirement in there, but also offer an alternative. So for those folks previously that did not have water meters, we had this alternative billing method for them that's based on the number of bedrooms. That wasn't codified in the city's ordinance anywhere. That was just a way we had agreed to handle it. So this brings that in there. So now the ordinance will read, you're required to do it in cases unless it's infeasible or prohibitive. In those instances, then we will allow you to keep that bedroom system. But it kind of brings everything with that we're doing under the ordinance and cleans that up. That's what this proposal is. And then, so this is the language on the screen related to that alternative method that's based on bedrooms. Again, this has been in place. We've been doing this for a number of years, but now we're just bringing that language within the city ordinance. Other changes, so similar to what we did for drinking water, the user fee section of the ordinance is now updated so that council at their discretion can impose a base rate. Right now, all of our billing happens on usage, and there's a minimum 1,000 cubic feet bill. So some changes here allows the council to consider changes to that. So this does not establish a base rate. The base rate would be $0 until council takes action, but it gives some flexibility for the future. Dissimilar to the water ordinance and within our rate study from over a year ago that we did, we do not recommend a base rate for the wastewater side at this time, and that is because the city's agreement with Colchester clearly specifies that they are to be treated as a single user. So they have 100 different connections, they would only be able to be charged a single base rate per our current agreement with them. So that would be something we'd need to talk about further because those costs would get spread more over South Burlington users. So that's basically the reason we're not recommending it this time. We also, we had a city center service area established previously, but this map, it provides the outline of that area and sets aside 150,000 gallons. This is important for our town center designation, our new town center designation. So this just clarifies and cleans up what's in the ordinance and provides a nice map, so it's clear to everybody. We also took this opportunity to clean up some language around allocations. So we have allowed folks that need allocations for wastewater that are under 1,000 gallons per day to only come in for a final. They don't need to do preliminary and final. We've cleaned up and clarified the difference between what a connection fee is versus the allocation fee. There were a lot of kind of general references in there to a sewer permit, so we clarified what that is. And then some other policies that we've used for many years when we issue these allocations, we put those right in the ordinance, so it's pretty clear how we handle that. Kind of that the allocation runs with the land, and then also a policy about when properties are vacant, the allocation returns to zero after 3 years.
Can I ask a question about that? If a property's been vacant for 3 years or more?
Sure.
So, do you know how many properties meet that criteria in the city right now?
I do not.
None? Or
I do not know.
You do not?
No.
Okay, okay. So, for example, the old yellow house that's covered with stereo on Dorset Street, right? That I think the DRB has seen a plan on that. If that hasn't been occupied for 10 years at least, if it gets torn down and a new building built, it'd have to go for a new allocation, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right,
Yep.
thanks. All right.
And then finally, just some miscellaneous administrative updates. Again, we had that one ordinance document that was stormwater and wastewater that got pulled into the Muni Code. So we're now separating that out. When we did it, we needed to take some definitions in one side and some enforcement in another. So it kind of cleans all that up. We added reference to our public works standards, which did not exist previously. So now that we have those, we can reference them in the ordinance, which is nice. And then just updated job titles and other outdated items that were in the ordinance. And we've, I guess, teased this a number of times now, but I'll say it one more time. We're currently working to identify our industrial users in the city. And once that process is finished, we may come back and request some additional modifications to the ordinance to better manage our industrial users who sometimes or oftentimes contribute higher strength waste and things of that nature to our system. So that's really to ensure the safety of our staff and our system, but as well as make sure they're paying their fair share for these high strength wastes they may discharge. So that is a quick run through of wastewater, and I'm going to go through now the stormwater ordinance.
Do you want comments on wastewater now, or do you want to wait till you've gone through stormwater also?
I think I'd like to go through all of it, Lori, and then
perfect. That's
we
what
can
I was
open it up
hoping.
to the public hearing or whoever council decides. But yeah,
Okay.
if that's all right.
Perfect.
So again, the stormwater ordinance basically establishes our regulations for how we manage our stormwater utility. These were last updated in 2021. The significant changes are kind of laid out here. I'll go through each of these, but basically to separate stormwater and sewer sections, change the billing calculation based on something the state of Vermont has done, update references to current laws, and update some language to reflect what's in the 2023 MS4 permit. Actually, I don't have more slides on these, so those are I'll stick here for a second. We divided the definitions between wastewater and stormwater appropriately within the ordinance document now that we have. And then it had to add an independent enforcement and fee section here, which mirrors what was there, but now it's a clean reference within the ordinance. We had previously used a median impervious area to develop our equivalent residential unit, or ERU. Now that has to be the average based on recent legislation. So we're looking into doing that and kind of rejiggering our ERU system here, but we've cleaned it up within the ordinance. And then just various updates, like I said, to match state laws and references to the 2023. So as I said, tonight's meeting serves as the third reading and second public hearing on the ordinance for stormwater and wastewater. And at this point, we recommend that council open it to the public hearing and take any feedback, and then close the hearing. At such time, council could take a variety of actions that are listed on the slide there, from adopting the amendments as warned, making any changes, and then warning an additional public hearing or table action to a future meeting.
So I move to open the public hearing and waive the formal reading of the duly warned proposed amendments to the city's sanitary sewer and stormwater ordinance pursuant to 24 AVSA, Chapter 13, Section 106.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So it's unanimous, and we're now in a public hearing. So who in the public would like to comment about this proposed change to the ordinance? Come step right up and make sure that the bright green light is on when you touch the button, and identify yourself. Is it bright green?
Light's green.
Yeah,
There you
now
go.
we
It's
hear you.
on.
Yeah.
Andy Johnson from 8 Maple Avenue. I'm also one of the operators of the water system in Queen City Park. And Dave and I have gone over a lot of it, but there are still some detailed questions that I'm concerned about. And partially I'm here because there's a lot of panic in Queen City Park all of a sudden when they hear they're going to pay $1,000. And for some of them, that's a huge amount of money. For some of them, it's not a big deal. But there's a lot of concern about it in Queen City Park. Most of my detailed concerns are I'm the one accountable for the water quality and the water surviving down there. But now there's an ordinance that says somebody else can put stuff in my thing that I have no say over and no idea how to control what they do. So how do I maintain my control over the water quality if somebody else can add features in the water system that I have no say over and no authority to regulate what happens? That's probably my main concern about how this is working. And there's some details of it that just have to get worked out. But if we adopt the ordinance and I haven't worked it out, then how do I ever work out some of these details? Because the ordinance is already done. And I could discuss some details if this is the place to do it, but I'm not sure this is the place to discuss details of my concerns. It'd be better with just Dave and I discussing them rather than all of you being involved. But if it's actually, the ordinance is already approved, then how do I get them included if it requires a change to the ordinance?
So your main concern is how do you maintain control of that
Of the
particular fire
devices in my
district?
system so I can maintain the quality.
Of your water system, right?
We've had experiences where
Yeah.
somebody put a new house and they got permission from South Burlington to put a new curb stop in, and they have a contractor digging up to put a new curb stop in, and I said, he can't do it because it's my system, not your system. And then I got a contractor throwing shovels and yelling and screaming and swearing and refusing to do it the way I say we have to do it in Queen City Park, because he got permission from South Burlington to put in a curb stop and doesn't have to listen to me. So it's been happening before where people get permission to do things in Queen City Park that don't fit our requirements. So I'm a little touchy about it, but I'm also still concerned, how do I control what goes in the system?
And the concern was the cost to possibly installing
Well,
water
a
meters.
lot of my neighbors are, they bought the houses when they were $40,000 and they're living on fixed incomes, and $1,000 to put in a meter is a big deal.
Right.
And some of them wouldn't cost that much. A couple $100 meter could go in some places. Some of them might cost more. And little concerns like if I have to dig up a curb stop to put in a thing, I have to pay a fee to dig in next to the road to put in a curb stop in. Do I get reimbursed for digging up so I can put your meter in, or is that something I have to pay for to help you put the meter in? So there's details to discuss that haven't been discussed.
Okay. And this is the first that we've heard of it at the second
Well,
public
Dave and I
hearing.
talked about the general concerns, and he
Yeah.
looked at it, and some of the houses he agrees it'd be prohibitive. I don't know how we decide that.
Right. Right.
But some of the details I haven't discussed because I thought that wasn't coming up this quick. I was surprised this was the final reading.
So I'll make a note of your comments, and then we'll ask questions of the gentleman up front here. Okay, after we hear other.
Thanks.
Okay, who's next? Come on up.
Good evening.
And-
Chris Lamoth, Two Brothers Drive. Two things, point of order. Is there any reason why the public can't see the presentation being presented to you guys right now?
Oh, yes, because this monitor isn't working at the moment. It is available in the council packet. It is out in the public realm if you want to see it, but you're right, it's not
Okay.
presenting up there because of a technical glitch tonight.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank
Sorry about that.
you. One quick question, clarification on the sewer allocation for Colchester. I just wanted to clarify, is that for the new sewage line going down Lakeshore Drive?
Oh, no, that's totally unrelated.
It is, okay.
I believe, but we'll ask that question for you.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
Yes, Michael Mittag. I had a question for these gentlemen on the sewer ordinance, not on the ordinance, but some time ago when I was involved in working with them with the stormwater utility on our development, I was told that
the sewer lines, very old sewer lines, are leaching sewage into the ground because they've got leaks in them, cracks or whatever, and that one of the solutions might be relining them. And I'm wondering whether the stormwater or the sewer, the sewage that's discharged, whether the same amount of sewage arrives at the treatment plant, and is there a way of measuring those two things?
Thank you, Michael. Anybody else? Anybody online? I can't see. Maybe you can see.
I can see.
You have comments, sir? One second. We're just going to check.
Yes, one comment.
Okay. Is it a comment or is it a person that has their hand up?
It's a person who's put a comment in the chat that I can either read it or they can say it.
Let's invite them to say it if they're willing
Okay.
to.
Mr. Thomas Powell, would you like to turn your camera on and ask your question of the council?
Hello.
Good
Can you hear
evening.
me?
Yes, we can hear you and see you. Thank you.
Good technology. Thank you. My question was a sort of a simple-minded one, and that is, I was interested in the concepts you were discussing about the industrial wastewater and how there are data yet to be collected or at least shared with us about the impact and the quality and quantity of that. And my question is, why not wait until those data are made available and somehow integrated into what we know for the magnitude of this problem, such as it is, before we start installing $1,000 meters in the ground in front of our houses? I happen to be a resident of Queen City Park as well. And it strikes me that on some level, it's a premature action to push ahead with this right now in the absence of the information that might come forward with respect to the industrial, perhaps more toxic wastewater that comes out of the city's businesses. So that's my comment.
Thank you, Mr. Powell.
Hi.
Please identify yourself too.
Yes, my name is Mark Finari, and I live at 62 Central Avenue in Queen City Park. And I'm really reacting to the proposal made for the shifts in billing for stormwater, for sewage. And basically, I've received a lot. I'm on the Prudential Committee, and I chair that committee, and I've received a lot of comments in the last week about the proposal. There are people who are concerned about the $1,000 charge to hook up to the system. And from my perspective, that's a fair concern. I think I'm confused about a number of things. The first thing that I'm confused about is we would like to have somebody from the Public Works Department come down to Queen City Park and have a public meeting and talk to the people about why they're making the shift that they want to make. Number one. Number two, what's really the rationale behind it? What is there to gain? Because we already know how much water we use every month. And maybe there needs to be a different system for billing for each of the households, which we've entertained ourselves at one point. So what we'd like to do is see some creative options to rather what we see as a bureaucratic response to a problem. So that's really what I came, is to carry those messages to this particular forum, because we had a great meeting around the public safety issue. The chief of police came down and basically got a standing ovation from 40 or 50 people, basically for the way he handled the questions and the real problems that happen living in Queen City Park adjacent to Red Rocks Park. We'd love to see that from the Department of Public Works. Rather than stagnant government, something that's creative. So that's all I have to say right now, and I want to thank people for allowing some public input.
You're welcome. Thank you. Online we have Steve Crowley. Steve, can you hear us?
I can, yes. Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you and see you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, first I have listening to Andy and Mark there, I was able to check off a whole lot of things I was going to say. So I really want to just support what they have said so far. You know, I too sort of question whether there's really a problem here. It seems the city can, you know, if it's a matter of cost, it seems like the fees that we do pay, I've always assumed they were set at a rate that was fair for the city and for everybody else around the city, for residential users. And if that's not a problem, well, maybe we don't have to fix it. I think that it might be really difficult to draw a line between which households ought to have meters and for which there's some kind of hardship. We have a lot of homes that are with crawl spaces. They're really hard to crawl around in. I don't know if these are indoor or outdoor meters. But some of you know, we're all in small lots and old houses that make it very difficult. So another area of concern is if we do go on to meters, to me, I don't know if people think that that is a fair way to do this. I don't. I think that the metering water intake is very different than the amount of sewage that goes out. Just for example, a lot of us, many people in our area have small gardens. We have a community garden. Those use a huge amount of water, and none of that goes into the sewer. On a given day, our water use can go up, can double. You know, we can have a sort of an average use day, and then when it's a good day for watering the gardens, it doubles. So people who are using that would be overcharged for sewage. So I guess the last question I have is I'm not sure how the city gets to impose something like that on a water system and users that they don't actually have any control over. You know, this isn't the city's water system; it's ours here in Queen City Park, and so you know, I just wonder how you get to do that even. But I mean, I understand the need to manage the sewage system, but I think we have a way that's working, and so you know, I welcome to hear more, just as Mark suggested, and talk about it further. But thanks for hearing my concerns.
You're welcome, Steve. Thank you. Anybody else want to speak during this public hearing? Anybody online? That's it. Do you want to answer these questions in the public hearing because I've made a list of them, or?
It's at the board's discretion.
Is that okay?
Yeah, however you'd like to do.
Just continue the discussion?
Sure.
All right. And then after we close public hearing, then we can talk about what we want to do next, right?
Okay.
Okay, so do you want to answer the first question about the water control for Queen City Park and how that might change under this new ordinance?
Sure. There's kind of multi-part there. So I'll start with, I think the easier question was about work in the city right of way. So the city does own the road through Queen City Park, but the drinking water pipes that are part of that system are owned by Queen City Park. So whenever anybody works in a city right of way, we charge them. We have a right-of-way permit just to make sure people put the road back together and do things properly. In this case, it might include also, disinfection, I believe, is one of Andy's primary concerns if somebody's cutting into one of the lines. So that right-of-way permit process is not addressed within the wastewater or drinking water or stormwater ordinance. That's sort of a separate permit process. I think that's an ongoing concern and thing we need to collaborate on. I'm not immediately familiar with the incident that Andy described, but I can certainly see how something like that could occur. So I think it's important in those cases that we kind of work together going forward with Andy and others down there to make sure everybody's informed, because it sounds like that particular situation was a bit of a surprise. And then I think the other piece of that was installing a meter. So when you install the meter, you do have to cut into the line that goes into the house, right? That's how the meter works. And so you need to do some proper disinfection there as well. So we would have our water superintendent there. I think Andy's concern is that with his control over the system and the drinking water, he'd want to make sure he was involved in that as well. And that's certainly a reasonable request, something we could work on with Andy and others. Was that everything on that piece, Tim? I jotted some notes down.
Well, I mean, does that answer your questions were your questions more like about the actual administration of the plant, the water generation system itself?
Some of them tell me answer, but one of them, if the meter fails,
Come up to the microphone, please. Sorry.
For the folks online, you need to talk into the
Thank
mic
you.
so they can hear you.
some of them are more, if the meter fails and has to be replaced, they're cutting it again, but sometimes those things happen and I wouldn't get notified. And then one of the reasons it's a problem, I keep my chlorine level almost zero. So if there is contamination, it spreads all over the place. So my experience in the past was working with Champlain Water. They're less concerned about contamination because they have a lot more chlorine and it takes care of it closely. And where I require a contractor to, everything he puts in, he has to decontaminate with chlorine before he hooks it up. And then sometimes it's a real challenge to get chlorine in the meter and in the appliances in the ground before you hook them all up. And that's been a challenge with some of the vendors I've used. It's one of I pretty much stick with ECI to do work down there because they're well trained and they don't break other things when they dig next to my water lines.
Okay, so these are mostly like, implementation questions, right? And
Implementation questions, but future, water meters have to
Right.
be repaired
okay,
and replaced.
right.
So it's another time of working on a system and how would I get notified ahead of time so I could be part of it.
Okay.
When I'm going to work on it, I'll usually turn the chlorine up quite a bit ahead of time so I have the extra protection. How would I get notified by somebody else coming in to work on it?
Right.
So
Do you
it's how
think
do
these
I
are-
maintain control of my system when somebody else is working on it that doesn't report to me?
Tom, are these problems today that we're having or any notification issues, or is this just a question about the future?
Well, right now it's not a problem because you don't have any appliances in my system
Right, okay.
and you don't come down and work on
But
it.
this is solely about when you start installing
When you
meters.
start installing something that I don't have any control over
I
and
see.
it's yours and you maintain it,
Yeah,
how would I know when it's happening and how would I take care of any problems that happen?
right. Do you want to respond to that at all?
Sure, yeah. So our water superintendent was here for the last couple of meetings. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it this evening. And Jay Nadeau, really knows the details of disinfection and what he requires. Everything's done to state standards, but perhaps Andy is more comfortable with kind of additional disinfection. I'm not sure. As far as what protections we could provide, so these meters, in the current ordinance and as proposed, any new meter is paid for by the resident and coordinated by the customer. But any kind of meter replacement is done by the water department. So that's not changing. That would just be new down in Queen City Park. Yeah.
And there was a question about the sewer system that's being installed around Mallets Bay. Would that sewage come back to our airport parkway system?
Good question. So that's not necessarily impacted by this per se, but that sewage would come to us and they pay based on the volume of sewage they send to the airport parkway plant. So as that amount of wastewater and sewage increases to the plant, we have a meter and they would pay more.
Okay, because they have their own pipe.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
Okay. And Michael was asking about the where he lives and possible leakage from his pipes and whether they could be relined. I can't remember what the question is. Do you want to just come up
Yeah,
real
no,
quick and refresh
I
me?
got it.
Or do you remember?
I got it. Yep.
Okay.
More general,
General,
not just
okay.
where I live, but in general, very old lines.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so it's true. Older lines can crack. We often worry about kind of the infiltration aspect of that, right? Water coming into our pipes, creating more water that we have to pump and then treat at the plant, which is expensive. But it is possible it could go the other way. We have no capital project at this time to do any relining of the pipes in Michael's neighborhood, Ridgewood Indian Creek area. But that's certainly something that we are aware of. Those are older pipes. There's a variety of older pipes throughout the city too that could also be looked at for that type of treatment.
But like last November, you pretty much know when there's a massive failure somewhere, like on Heinsberg Road, right?
We figure it out pretty quick.
And unfortunately, it might end up in a basement or two. Do you want to talk about, so I think one of the general concepts about how we pay for sewer, right, is by virtue of how much fresh water we use. I mean, if it's not the summertime and you're not watering garden, pretty much every drop that comes out either goes down the drain or it goes down the toilet or it goes down the shower. It goes somewhere. And so every bit of water that comes in fresh is going to go down a sewer pipe. The only exception pretty much is in the summer, or unless you hooked a hose up outside and filled up your pool, your small pool or whatever it is, right? And like everybody except for Queen City Park who doesn't have a meter, everybody in the city that doesn't have a meter has been paying with this type of model for a very, very, very long time. I would say probably lots of decades, right?
Yeah, correct, Tim. And this isn't unique to South Burlington or even our region. It's very common that this is how metering is done for both drinking water, wastewater. To address some of those concerns, I would say that if folks are doing a lot of irrigation, we offer an opportunity to have a second line put in that is billed as kind of a water only, right? If you're just using it, you can use that separate meter. If someone's filling up a pool, they call ahead of time, we can sort of back that volume out. And just a note, we do bill quarterly. So on any given day, if somebody uses twice as much water, it's a quarterly bill. It's not like a daily bill. And I think we've heard previously, folks have talked about how a majority of people down there likely use the minimum water anyway. So even, I don't think that would be a major impact, the amount of garden watering that happens. But
And do you want to comment on Tom Powell's question about the industrial question that you had in your slide packet, right, about the need to look at that in the future, but doesn't have to necessarily be in this particular ordinance proposal, correct?
It's a good question. So this is primarily driven by Act 47 compliance. So that act is passed. We are to come into compliance with it. I don't know the date. I think it has passed, though, in July. So we are playing catch up there. So that's why this has come to you now over the course of the last couple of months in these meetings. The industrial user survey wouldn't necessarily have any impact on billing in Queen City Park or anything of that nature. I think the impact there could potentially, and I'm going to use the word potentially because we haven't done anything yet, be for some of our industrial commercial facilities, right? So again, if they're sending very high strength waste or another brewery moves into town, right, we would want a way to make sure they're paying their fair share for treatment of that higher strength waste. And so also just for us to identify who those users are, that's step one in this process, figure out what they're discharging and making sure they're not discharging things that could be harmful to our equipment or even our staff, as we, we're concerned about recently with the PFAS incident.
Or
we
harmful to your sanitation process.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Right,
we
like,
wouldn't want.
like a brewery could be, right? You have a very defined biological sanitation process that can be upset by pH changes and chemical changes, things like that from incoming flows, right? So
That's absolutely correct. And when something upsets it, it's good for us to have an idea where it might have come from. So again, understanding who's discharging. But to your point, Tim, that is very possible. And our wastewater superintendent is here tonight, and he would love to talk to you about that more if you'd like. The intricacies of the wastewater treatment plant.
we're going to get our tour. We are going to get it.
Yes, come for the tour.
And I guess the final question is, and we can discuss this after we close the public hearing, is so there is a clause in there for infeasible. So those folks that don't have a meter, right, where it's prohibitive or infeasible to actually install a meter. It could be because the pipe is buried beneath a slab and there's no way to hook it up somewhere easily without disturbing the household. I mean, if you have a basement, right, the pipe probably comes in. Most people have a meter already, right? So, I mean, do you know? So right now, does anybody in Queen City Park have a water meter? I mean, if was nobody,
Nobody.
even if the house was rebuilt in the last 20 years,
Nobody.
it still didn't have a meter.
No.
If somebody were to tear a house down in Queen City Park and rebuild it, there would be a requirement to have a meter then, wouldn't it?
Per the ordinance, it would.
It would be, okay.
But not necessarily per what would happen in Queen
Not
City
necessarily
Park.
for the building permit.
No, not for the permit, okay.
Yeah, not for the permit, yeah. So again, per the ordinance right now, they would be required to do it, right? If somebody puts a new home in, for example.
Right.
So just to reiterate, 'cause I think this is an important point. This is still allowing for that in those instances where it's not feasible or prohibitive on a cost basis, perhaps, right? But trying to bring as many folks into being billed the same way and provide some consistency there as we move forward is the impetus of why we're looking at changing this right now. And also, I don't like having a billing system that we implement for a small number of homes that's just not defined in our ordinance. So that's why we're talking about this, is to sort of cover the city's bases there and be very clear about how we're doing this going forward.
Is the non-meter model that you proposed by billing, was it 75% of the minimum for the first bedroom and then a declining for the second and the rest of the bedrooms? Is that how it's being done today?
Correct.
It is, okay. So
It's the
that
same,
is
yeah.
the normal model, okay.
So I have some questions on this, and I don't know if I do it now or after we close the hearing.
Did you have a comment?
I just wanted to underline a point. I think it would be worth closing the public hearing and then having council have your own discussion.
Yeah.
But I just want to underline a point Tom just made, which is this rewrite of this ordinance that we've been doing over the last couple of months is really an attempt to implement state statute that is a year old at this point. So we are playing major catch up, trying to get aligned to our water sewer service area. As we were doing that, since this ordinance hadn't been touched for about 15 years, we took that opportunity to modernize the language as well. I think, one of the things we talk about a lot, whether it's LDRs or ordinances, is they're never perfect. They're always about 80% right. And one of the reasons we have these governance structures is to fine tune them over time. So just because you take action or don't doesn't mean we can't fine tune it as we learn more over time. And then finally, just want to remind the council, you do have fiscal fiduciary oversight over our utilities. Part of this work is to ensure that we are fairly and equally charging all customers. And we just are investing a lot of money in pump stations for Queen City Park. So while it's not the water service that is ours, there are parts of it that are impacting the ratepayers citywide.
Good point. So if there's nothing else, I think I'll have a motion to close the public hearing.
So I move to close the public hearing. Our proposed amendments as warned to the City of South Burlington Sanitary Sewer and Stormwater Ordinance pursuant to 24 VSA Chapter 13, Section 106.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. So we're out of the public hearing now, and it's time for council discussion about this proposed ordinance change. Who would like to kick it off? Andrew?
Can I make a suggestion before you go, is to turn one of these around so we can see what's going on?
There's only one function.
There's nothing else.
Yeah, nothing to see. You're seeing what's going on right now.
So to me, there's kind of two questions. One, a question of process, and then substance around the points that were raised. As a process matter, I think it seems to be important to put into law, enact the bulk of these changes, which has nothing to do with the Queen City Park issue.
Yep.
But then I would like to come back and fix or maybe revise what we did in Queen City Park. And the suggestion I would have is to mostly continue the current process, but codify it more clearly. So have the ordinance allow residents to optionally install a meter, which would then be used as billing for stormwater. Or if they don't, then assess a fee per bedroom, which is maybe slightly higher than we think would be the stormwater assessment had the resident installed a meter. So that the city is whole. We're kind of paid for our administrative overhead of administering kind of two parallel systems, and the resident has some incentive, over time to install the meter, because they're probably paying more than they would be had they installed the meter, but not a lot more, just a bit more. So that's how I would address it, and I would like to do that in a second phase after we adopt the bulk of this ordinance.
Did you want to talk?
I had a couple questions. One is just, can I get clarification either from Tom or Jesse on the governance of the separate water district? There was a comment made that, do we have the authority to make that change? Can I get that clarification?
So I could try with Andy looking at me. He's, I would say, more the expert. So Queen City Park has its own water district and its own water source that they administer. So they're not getting water through our water utility, but we do provide wastewater coverage for Queen City Park. So we pump sewage up and treat it, but we don't provide them water. They maintain their own water system. Is that 50% right?
I talked to Brian Redmond, who is the state, he's in charge of my water system at the state. He says I probably can't stop you legally.
If I could jump in, I think, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, he's expressing a responsibility to provide safe drinking water, I think is what it is. So again, Queen City Park is part of South Burlington, subject to city ordinance. So I think if that helps clarify it a little bit.
I appreciate that. And from my standpoint, a couple things. One is when, as much as we think we've communicated the discussion of ordinances like this one, we're getting substantive feedback kind of in, I wouldn't say the 11th hour, but we've warned this for action or potential action, I think a couple of times. So I know, consistent with some of my original comments when I was elected to serve on the council, just the notion of anticipating stakeholders that may be impacted by changes in ordinance and being proactive about seeking feedback out from those community members, I think is clearly an opportunity. The notion of, I think the Department of Public Works has done an excellent job kind of revising this and educating council on what we're trying to do. And I think, aside from complying with state statute, the notion of standardizing a billing system and providing kind of equity across the city, and not differentiating when it's feasible is appropriate. A couple things I would throw out there as potential suggestions. It's not inconsistent with my colleague Andrew's recommendation of resolving the Queen City Park issue in a separate action, but would be the notion of maybe a just arbitrarily, from my standpoint, like a 2-year lead time to prepare financially for the cost of the meter installation where it's feasible, and then using the second bedroom method of billing where it is not feasible might be another thought to move forward on that standardization model. Just my thoughts at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Lori?
Okay, so
Lori, where do you live?
I live in Queen City Park. There you go. And I think it's we're spending a lot of time on a very small issue, and I apologize for that. But it's not small to the neighbors of Queen City Park. And I personally, I'm in favor of meters, so I'll just put that out there. I think that meters are a way to get people to conserve, and I think there are good reasons for them. I think in terms of the water system in Queen City Park, I have really heard from Dave and from Public Works that the real purpose for do this is to create, to get rid of special conditions not defined in the current ordinance. Our goal is to bill all customers in the same manner and to ensure that building methods are established within the city ordinances. We are trying to eliminate special cases that do not treat our customers equally. So I think that's a great goal, and I think that when you get there, it makes sense to require everybody to have meters. I think as long as there are 2 different billing methods that are happening, it makes sense to have it be optional. Whether there are 5 people that are being handled specially or 80 people that are being handled specially is really insignificant. So we're either going to everybody being treated the same, or the people that have options, that option is to everybody currently. So if it's going to take 5 years to bring everybody into compliance, that's when everybody needs to have a meter. Between then, it's optional, and I'll sign up for a meter. But I think that if there's still special billing happening, that should be an option for anybody who does not have a meter and does not want to spend the $1,000, which will have according to the numbers I got from David, anywhere from a 5 to a 10-year or longer payback period. And for some of our residents, that's a big concern. So I would like to see this move forward, but I too, like Andrew, want to make sure that this issue gets clarified in a way so that we know what's happening, and the people in Queen City Park know that they're not facing something imminently.
Yeah, I just had a couple of points, unless you had some comments too, Tim.
Well, I was just going to comment that the ordinance, if we took action and passed it tonight, the current billing model would not change in Queen City Park at all. It would remain the same, right? The difference is if somebody has the ability to install a meter and it is installed, there is a charge for that of $1,000, and that's for the meter itself, right? And any labor related to putting it in, right? But do you have a list of homes that you could possibly install a meter in today in Queen City Park? I'll bet the answer is no.
Yeah, so we do have a list of folks where they're being billed on this alternative method. I keep the bedroom method. I don't know what the best name for it is. So we do know the folks that we'd have to reach out to at some point, I will say. I just want to also make the point that that system actually does charge folks that are on it more than a meter would.
Yes.
So it does provide that incentive. That's why there's that payback period over a couple of years. And again, the more bedrooms you have, the shorter that payback period. I don't believe there is a payback period for the one bedroom units. Right. That's sort of a wash because you're already paying the minimum. So the other thing to note here was that, so we've not in the ordinance defined an implementation timeline. This has gone on for quite some time. So certainly open to council feedback when we take that list and eventually send the letters. It wasn't my intent to run out and do that tomorrow if this got passed tonight. We've got a variety of other priorities we're also working on. So we could certainly talk about take council's thoughts on an implementation timeline on what those letters would say and work with the manager on that as well. I'd be more than open to that course of action.
Yeah, I just want to say anecdotally, Lori and I compared our water bills, right? And he's on the current, first, second, third bedroom, right? And I'm on a meter. And I think proportionally, if we flush the same amount, I don't know, right? But he pays a little bit more than I do, and I have more bedrooms, So I think you're right. I think that in general, Queen City Park is probably paying higher bills than the equivalent type homes in the city. So that of that size. So that's an interesting thing that you should know.
Right, except for the one bedroom.
Except for the one bedroom, right?
Right.
I'm not sure how many of those there are in Queen City Park.
Yeah, okay.
Probably a few, but yeah. Okay. Did you want to make some other remarks?
No, I was just trying to address some of the council's points because I think they're good considerations.
So in moving this forward, is there a way to encapsulate in the motion the desire to have this issues resolved going forward and move this forward as an approved motion?
Well, go ahead.
If council were to make any changes, we would have to re-warn for an additional public hearing. So we would need to know those changes, specify them, publicize those, reach out to the other paper, and then come back and have another hearing.
No, but I think, Tom, the suggestion is, because we know that the bulk of this is to comply with Act 47, and I think my perspective is it's kind of critical that we do conform our laws at this point to Act 47 to not avoid a lot of ambiguity and conflicts that arise. The suggestion is to adopt this now without changes, but come back in a future date in, say, a few months with a further small change to address the questions we've been discussing around Queen City.
And if we don't do that, when the letters go out, there will be some comments that come at least to me and maybe to other counselors.
You live there.
And then we can bring it up at that point. So I think it won't get lost.
I'm comfortable.
So I'm comfortable moving forward.
So would we want to take action and make a motion to?
I don't have that. Does someone have a
So
motion?
I move to adopt the amended sanitary sewer and stormwater ordinance as warned pursuant to 24 VSA Chapter 13, Section 107, acknowledging an intent after adoption at some point in the future to revisit some of the discussion that we had tonight with respect to the Queen City Park billing.
A second.
We have a motion and a second. I see Mike Scanlon is online now. Is there any discussion? Mike, did you want to say something?
Yes. I just caught the last sort of 5 minutes conversation, but I think in prior conversations with folks, and I think I get the gist of what the intent is. It seems very logical to me. I think we all agree the intent is to standardize, to have transparency and compliance with Act 47, but also have a sense of fairness in the transition period. And I guess that's what this motion would be set up to do, is to start the process to have standardization, but a next step, if I understand correctly, would be to try to find a way to get to in a fair way, in a reasonable time frame, to a complete standardization of the system. Is that a correct understanding? Because again, sorry, I just came in the last 5 minutes.
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay.
So you ready for the vote? All those in
Then
favor
I'm ready
say
for
aye.
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 Mike votes aye. It's unanimous. Thank you, Mike. All right. Thank you very much. So now we've gone through 7 and 8, and now we can talk about approving the resolution for the stormwater credit manual, right? So we've already had the discussion. Do we want to go ahead and have a motion for that? This is item 9 that we visited earlier.
I move to approve Resolution 2024-18 to adopt the Stormwater Credit Manual as presented.
Second.
Second? Oh,
Third.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Mike, you were offline earlier, so do you want to participate in the vote or do you want to abstain?
Yes, and I'll participate in the vote. I read in on the documents that Jesse shared with all of us.
So I didn't understand. Did you want to vote on this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, on the vote. I read in on the documents that Jesse shared with us.
Okay. So all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And Mike
Aye.
votes yes. It's unanimous. Thank you, Mike. So now we're moving on to item 10, which is receive an update from the Burlington International Airport Commission with our designated commissioner, Helen Reilly. Come on down, Helen. Helen is a former chair of the city council, if you didn't know, and current member of the planning commission and serves on the airport commission. Good evening, Helen. And just to review, we haven't had an update in a while, so there's some new information that we're looking for about what's going on at the airport. What about this hotel? What about leaded fuel coming down from the sky from general aviation? What about?
Right. I will try to bring you up to date, and thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here and share with you some of the, I think, important issues that the airport has been tackling. And I would also really suggest or recommend that, and this isn't something I always did, but as chair, but include maybe an annual presentation by the director of the airport to kind of bring you up to speed on that higher policy level that I think would be helpful. And I'm sure is more than willing to do that. And the other thought I had, because I sent to you a couple documents that or at least one that the airport had pulled together and given to the Burlington City Council. So it may be that I should be more diligent as your commissioner to say, maybe you ought to send those documents to the South Burlington City Council, maybe not at the same time since they really oversee and manage the airport, but just as a kind of courtesy to understand where they hope to go and what they're asking the city council to do. I don't think it has to be every report they give, because they ask for support for different grants that they're applying for, and I'm not sure all of those are of real interest to South Burlington. Some might be, but I think that might be a way to stay attuned to their public voice. The only thing I can offer on the hotel is that unfortunately we had to back away from the organization that was trying to build it. They couldn't find financing, and we gave them a long time to find that, and we kept extending it, and eventually it just became clear that this wasn't going to go forward, so we severed that.
The first plan was to have the hotel in front of the parking garage, and then the FAA nixed that, right?
Right,
Then they were
and-
going to put it behind the garage.
Well, to sort of when you're facing the garage,
Yeah.
the garage, it's to the left.
To the left. I'm thinking about
Yeah.
towards the
Yeah,
entrance.
yeah,
Okay.
and and there were some issues, I believe, that the DRB found that they, you know, were new and were important to include in, and will be in the next RFP. But they still are very interested in building one and feel that it would be a real asset and not necessarily, I guess, in competition with other hotels. One might think they wouldn't like that, but I don't think that's the case in the current economy. I mean, hotel rooms are pretty expensive now, so if you go along the same model as if you build a whole lot of housing, the price will come down. Maybe that's true with hotel rooms. If you are over hotel roomed, the prices drop a little bit and become more affordable. But so they are continuing that. In terms of the fuel, I know there was some concern by a number of residents, and I can tell you that the general aviation planes are using what they call 100 low lead fuel. It still has lead in it, and it still, I guess, pollutes as much as a lead gasoline does. But there were some comments about, can't the airport just refuse to use leaded fuel? And we really can't legally limit. Well, there are a couple issues. One, there's too many planes, little planes flying in and out, and why can't we just make this a commercial airport and not include private planes? And we just legally can't limit any type of aeronautical activity. It's under our obligation, and its language to that effect is included in every grant assurance document that we sign. So that just isn't possible in terms of the FAA, unless you wanted to cut ties with the FAA. But then we really wouldn't have an airport. So I think that is probably largely related to Beta, because they have a lot of little planes that they own, and they encouraged all of their employees to learn to fly. It is a revenue source for the airport, because every time you take off and land, there's a charge. And it's not obviously a big plane, it's charged more than a little plane, but those do add up. We also cannot ban fuel use, because right now there are limitations on what type of fuel the FAA aircraft manufacturers require for specific aircraft. But they are working on approving an ultra-low unleaded fuel for piston engines. I think the timeline, and I sent you some documents, the timeline is like 2030. So they're working on it, and I think Heritage Aviation is working with them. That just is nothing that, again, the airport can mandate of aircraft without really getting in trouble with the FAA and having some ramifications that I think would be not positive for our economy, our business, and our tourism and individuals who fly in and out of Burlington. If you have, I mean, there's 6 points to achieving this lead-free goal. They have a little acronym, EAGLE. That sounds so bureaucratic, doesn't it? But they, it's on people's minds, and they're working on it.
It's the EPA that's
yes,
driving that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Other things that are sort of big issues for us, I think, are the noise and sound abatement program. The company, we contracted again with Jones Payne to carry out the outreach, the design, and ultimately manage the improvements to the homes. I think a good move is that they will be using, temporarily anyway, be based at the airport. So I think that will be more convenient for the residents to connect with them and the airport to work closely with Jones Payne. We did do some, let's see, I have some other, the all the contracts and the construction for all these homes is it's frustratingly slow, I think. To date, we actually have completed 9, and there's hundreds. But that's phase 1, and it was delayed, as I think you've all read, because the windows they ordered, the company went out of business or something, and they couldn't get them, and they had to find different windows, and all of that took held them back. Then in phase 2, we have the money, and we've gone forward with completing 5 more homes and the design of 54, because it's a couple-step process. You go to the homeowners, you tell them what is possible, they have to agree, then you assess the home on what is possible. We've done the testing. The testing has been done, so they now know what actually works and will reduce the noise level, decibel level inside the home. So they don't have to do the same kind of testing for every single home. It's pretty well established. So things should go a little faster. And then in phase 3, that construction is designed for 47 homes this fall. So through this fall of 24 and into spring of 25, they'll be working on 47 homes. Some in South Burlington and some in Winooski. I don't think there's any in Williston. And then along with that work, they also will be reaching out to 50 more homes to find out, do you want to do this? Do you sign up for the program? And what it is exactly your home needs. And then phase 4 will take out of that design of 50, 16 homes to start doing the actual construction. And that is estimated to begin spring of 25. And while they're working on those 16 homes, they then will work on the design for the next 50. So it's probably a decade at least of work. But we've been successful in applying for the money to pay for this. So it seems to be moving along, although for the people living there, I suspect it seems very slow. And occasionally someone backs out and says, well, we thought we wanted this and we don't.
Do the homeowners have to leave during the construction, or is it compatible with them staying in the home?
I think I think it probably depends on what they have to do. The feedback has been very positive. Almost all of the families have appreciated the way the outreach has happened, the process, and the work. So people aren't grumbling about, they were annoyed, I guess, when the windows didn't come in, but that was a supply issue that I think everyone has faced. So, so I think in terms of the public adoption of this and their response to how they've been treated, we've been told that it's very positive. So I feel good about that. Along with the noise sound abatement program, we have a new, or will have a new sound plan released in October.
Noise map?
Noise map, a new noise map, which is a requirement. And that will be released in October. There's a technical committee that also will be engaged with public hearings. And then once that's adopted, possibly, I guess, it could affect some of the homes that currently might be in that, 85 or to 75 sound block.
Well, so the previous noise map, did that include modeling for the F-35 or existing F-16? And will this new noise map include actual F-35?
I think it included modeling of the F-35, and this time I suspect it's including the real, although they kind of use a model for that. So it isn't like they have a little sound meter right at Burlington International Airport that aggregates that noise. They have some kind of model that they use applied with how many takeoffs, I guess, and how many planes are based and that kind of data. Other things, we're working on some new, or actually the city of Burlington is working on some new taxi rules. People were concerned that they couldn't use a credit card, so they're requiring that because not everyone has cash, and that was a issue on both sides. You didn't know they didn't take a credit card and you get to your house and you don't have the cash. And then some people don't like to use credit cards, but they're working on that. I think I mentioned when I was still on the council that they had applied for the Northern Border Regulation Commission for a full timber grant, and that allows them to use timber in the construction of what we call Project Next, which is the new terminal extension. And instead of using steel, you use this timber. So it's a natural product. It has adds to it supports the wood elements in the new plan, and it was a $1.78 million grant. The whole project is about $63 million, but this is a very competitive grant, and we were very pleased that kind of flows with some of the goals, I guess, of both South Burlington, but they're really driven by Burlington's, climate action plan. So I think that was a good grant to receive. Breeze is adding a direct to Fort Myers flight daily, October 4th. And United direct to Denver is coming back again in September. The other issue that affected us was that whole suppression systems leakage. And so we followed up on that, and that occurred in two of the Air Guards hangars, and they are apparently required by the military to use the PFAS. However, all of the hangars that BTV manages use water. So that's one of those military things, I guess, that you can't always argue with. And I guess what I would ask you is if you have any issues that you want me to bring before the commission, please let me know, because there's a special time for the different towns to ask their questions. We can get it on the agenda, or I can just raise it and it can be on a later agenda. But since I don't sit there anymore, I don't know what all those issues might be. And so I'd be more than happy to get information for you or address them in ways that are supportive for you.
Can you remind me of the cadence of those meetings?
When they happen, it's the first Wednesday of every month.
Okay.
So I suppose, on the Monday before, if something came up and you let me know, I could at least raise the issue and it could get on a future agenda, or they could directly connect with Jesse or you, Tim, or the council. But I would suggest that I think there was a time, as some of you well remember, that we were not easy partners, or they were not easy partners for us, and there was some contention, and we're past that. We have a director who I think is very willing to reach out to the public and listen to them and meet with whomever in the airport area, as well as the council. So I think we can embrace that, what can work for everyone.
Do you have any numbers on embarkations and how their
You
business
know,
is
I
doing?
didn't bring them, but that is, I didn't know how many numbers to bring you because we go over a lot of numbers. But I will say that in terms of seats and weights and all the measurement for how well the airport's doing, we are back to our or 2019, we're a little
Pre-COVID?
bit
Yeah.
above. So we're making a fair amount of money on the parking garage. And
Every time I go in, it's full. Got to go to the top floor. Unless you have an electric car.
so financially, the airport is in good shape. We still have some ARPA money left.
Better spend it.
We will be. as you will. You have till the 2025, right? And so I think the management and how they're the finances are very strong and the numbers are up. And for we're probably I think Nick said we're one of the busiest, if not the busiest, airport of that size in the country. There are more people flying in and out with fewer flights, but the planes are bigger, which is part of the reason for this new project Next, is to allow them all to line up and have plenty of space. And that, provides, I think, better service to the flying public.
Does the council have questions for Helen? Andrew?
Helen, thank you for that very comprehensive report.
Oh, you're welcome.
I have a question you may not be able to answer, but if you
Well,
can't,
I will
that's okay.
try to
We'll
get the
take it
answer,
back.
yeah.
Just in terms of the lead, do you know whether it's a cost issue or a technology issue, in the sense that can those small planes use the super, lead-free fuel, but it costs more? Or is it just a case that they would need a new engine, it just doesn't work?
I don't know, although I think some of it might even be related to the availability. I kind of suspect that it can be used, but it's a question of how much is produced and how to get it here, which then impacts, I think, the cost. But I will get back with
Thank you.
you.
Because the thought is, if it can, and it just costs more, there may be a way to not require it, but to set the fee structure so as to incentivize it.
Okay. Any other questions? I'll get back with you on that. Yes.
I had a couple. Thanks, Ellen. This one thing about I don't know if this can be a request, but for the October noise map, just to ask the question whether or not that can be based on actual measurements versus the mapping, or something complementary, maybe some days of actual.
Okay.
The other area is, I think I reported this at our last meeting, but I did have some company in town that had rented a car at the airport, and there was a favorable rate for an EV vehicle. So I just wondered if there was any updates on kind of conversion of rental vehicles to EV and the supporting infrastructure there that would complement our city plan. And lastly, this may not be specifically relative to the Airport Commission, but are there any air quality measurements that are done in various locations within, say, Chittenden County, but even around South Burlington, that might capture some of the variations that exist due to heavy air traffic, for instance? Not dissimilar to
Right.
gas emissions with motor vehicles.
Yeah, there used to be a trailer
There
down at the
are,
corner
but-
of South Winooski and Maine in that
Yeah.
parking lot that had a lot of equipment and a lot of air handling and sensors, but I don't know if it's still there.
I don't know. I think one of the issues I remember someone talking about is how you, allocate that air
Yeah.
pollution to which community, who then has that as part of their goal to, and I think once you're in the air, it's kind of hard to put the walls up and say, oh, that's South Burlington's problem and that's Burlington's problem. But I will follow up on those questions. So one is about the air quality measure, the lead gas technology or cost, the sound map. You want it specific for like a particular day?
No, I'm just saying if there is, I guess it's fundamental question, will they be measuring actual for that noise map or doing a projected algorithm? And if there's consistency enough in the flight schedule that personally it'd be nice to see actual from my standpoint, but just what the noise map will be mapping.
Well, when you look on the map that's on the website, that is actual, but it won't differentiate between whether it's military or commercial. But, so I'm guessing that the map, it has to be a map that's sort of an average and not, December 25th, this is the map for,
Yeah, well, just
10 years.
clarification on what to expect.
But
with the
I will,
October noise map.
and then the rental vehicles to EV, what's happening there and can they encourage them? I know we've put in and I can't remember the number, but a great number of EV charging stations in the airport. I mean, in the, what do you call it, in the garage.
Yeah.
So,
I have one quick question to add
yes,
regarding the noise map. Can you find out what noise metric they're using on that map, whether it is LMAX or what they use? So is it showing what the noise is over an hour, or is it showing what the loudest noise is?
No, it's yeah. There's a specific statistic that it is. It's like a 24-hour DNL, right? Daily noise.
Yeah, so the DNL,
Yeah.
which really doesn't speak to what the LMAX is.
But this is the standard that they have to use.
Okay.
Yeah.
right, this
Thank
is
you.
the requirement. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a federal algorithm that's
Okay.
developed. You can't change it.
Anything else? Thank you very much.
All right, well, you're very
Oh,
welcome.
Mike, sorry, I wasn't. Whoop, he just disappeared. Come back, Mike. Camera back on.
Yes. There we go. If I could, 3 questions, if I may.
Sure.
Yes, thanks very much. I really appreciate it. And it was great to hear that the economic engine aspect of the Burlington, as well as just life convenience, is coming back to its old levels, and therefore suggesting it's on a favorable trend forward. The 3 questions I had is about the housing that falls within the current noise abatement zoning. Is there any way to, or do you know, or is there any way to get what is the number of South Burlington houses which are currently affected?
Oh, yes.
Because
You can go on the website and you can actually go house by house.
okay, all right, but it'll give you a total.
You
I
can
was just looking for the total.
identify what each individual has. That's how homeowners know that they might be
Correct.
next in line.
But is there a total number off the top of your head, or I go to the website and
I
count
want to
house by
say
house?
that there, I don't know. I don't know. There was a point, I want to say 2,000, but I think that's too much.
Okay, because I was struck by you
Well,
saying
that's
that.
in the whole, that's not in South Burlington. There's probably 1,200 or something.
Right.
I will find out the number. I really can't remember.
Okay, that would be good to know, just to know what our target is in terms of our community. You said that the funding had been allocated. I take it that means just for the current year, or has funding been allocated already for the entire project of addressing all the houses, including those in South Burlington?
No, it's a year by year thing.
Okay.
I think there was
Okay,
an understanding and a position that this was going to be, originally they thought it was going to be $50 million, but then how each house, they thought it was going to be about 25,000 and it turns out to be 50,000. So it's, and things just keep going up. So
No,
it's year by year, but they, one of the things that I think is good is that we have a process in place that is, I don't know, similar to when Alana talks about, well, this is shovel ready. So you get your farther up on the queue if it's shovel ready. And I think when we apply for money, we can say, this is exactly how many homes that we can do in this period of time.
does that mean it can be accelerated? Because listening to you, it sounded like the sequence was somewhere in the 50 to 55 per year. If we're talking 1,200 houses in South Burlington alone, you know, that's putting us 20 years out. Is there any way that this process can be accelerated? If the question is the question that there's just money can only be allotted in certain allotments, or, you know, there's a limited workforce capability here. I'm just wondering in terms of, for our good citizens, you know, is there any hope to move this process forward faster?
I think it's both those issues. There's only so much money available on an annual basis from the FAA to pay for this. And I suspect there's some workforce issues.
Yes, okay. But I guess we can always keep looking at that, especially if, as you say, once they develop it, they don't have to go back and test the houses. Hopefully the numbers will go faster. Question on, you talked about their taxi in Burlington, suggesting that, you know, address the credit card issue. Do you know if there's been any discussion between the airport, Burlington, the city, and GMT on creating sort of public transit as a better option, or more, or how's that option working, or is that option effective at all? I was just wondering.
I haven't heard any recent update, but I can follow up on that.
Because I know one of the challenges is most of the flights are 5, 6 in the morning, and that doesn't really align itself with the GMT. But again, there's a, you know, either from hotels or from tree stops, just another way of trying to meet our goal of getting, you know, single issue cars off the road. Last thing is it was great to hear about the additional flights that you mentioned and the return of United in September. I guess it's competing with our snowbirds coming to us. But New York was I think a lot of people were hit by the JetBlue pulling back on the flights to New York. And I know that was a New York driven issue. It had nothing to do with Burlington. It had to do with capacity. Do you have any idea, Chance? That was almost a year ago. They had suggested they were going to revisit that in a year. Again, as a business destination, also a holiday destination, but clearly the business destination. They'd be interested to know if the frequency of flights to New York would return.
Okay, I can follow up and see if
prospect.
they're still limiting the number of flights into the New York area. I don't know how they.
And lastly, at your convenience, as your backup, I look very forward at your convenience to join you at one of these meetings at the beginning of the month, to be able to be in a position when you're on leave or whatever, to be able to step in for whatever meetings I would have to cover in your absence.
I'm sorry, I didn't get the.
I'm your backup on this.
Okay.
For this
I didn't
position.
know that. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I assume
No
the
one
city
told me I had someone at my back.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So just to be sure that if I have to step in when you're on leave, I know what I'm doing. I would welcome an opportunity to join you at one of these meetings and to hear all the issues that you so effectively and fully shared with us.
Oh, sure. They're open to the public, so you're welcome, and you can
good.
join in electronically, so you don't have to find a parking space.
You get a parking coupon for that?
I get a parking.
You get a okay.
Only for the meetings. I've been tempted to use it other times, but I have not.
Good
Okay.
integrity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helen, for
Thank
coming
you.
tonight for the update. Yeah. And maybe we'll have you back in a few months. Okay. All right, will do. Thank you very much. So it's 8:30. Does anybody need a break? Can we take a 5-minute break? Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break right now, folks. We'll see you at 8:35. Thank you. All right, so we're back and seated, and we're resuming our city council meeting tonight. We are on item 11, which is discussion and possible action to receive a request from the Charter Committee to expand the city council and provide direction to staff. Tonight we have Peter Taylor and Ms. Alond here. So why don't you give us the background on this, because you know, it was in the packet, but I'd like to have you tell us again.
Good evening, and thanks for having us. My name's Peter Taylor. I'm the current chair of the Charter Committee. And just quickly, if I could, because I don't know who's online, but Wendell Coleman is on the Charter Committee. Where do you live, Wendell?
Up on by the radio stations.
Okay. And Paul?
Yeah. Eastwoods.
Eastwoods?
Yes.
And is there anybody else online that's from the Charter Committee? Do you know? No? Okay. I just wanted to know who might be here. I'm going to ask Anne to review the document she wrote up that sort of summarizes this portion of our report that has a unanimous request from the committee. And then I'll make a few closing comments, and then we can talk.
Thank you. And also thank you for letting me come before you 2 months ago at the retreat to explain this issue and hope that you would bring it up. I appreciate you having us here. The Charter Committee was convened in February of 2022 by the council, asking us to take a look at possible, maybe having a mayor, different changes for the city charter, and with an eye toward expanding diversity in general. And we successfully got a couple of extra members of the school board, which we're pretty excited about. And so we're here to reiterate the Charter Committee's recommendation that the City Council put onto the ballot, the public ballot, the question of whether the City Council, should be expanded in number. And we have various reasons for it. I just wanted to point out that Councilor Smith from Queen City Park was able to bring up his experience with the water meter, the lack of water meter, and looking at all the apartments being built. It would be great to have a renter on the council, and there's diversities of skills and experiences, and so we're hoping that this can go forward, Peter.
Yeah. One of the things council has been talking about are committees and how to respond to committees and get committees more active and involved and responsive to the council and the council back. And I think one way to do that is when you give a committee a task and they come back with a unanimous recommendation, that the council responds to that in a positive manner. We put 18 months of effort into this report, came up with 2 unanimous recommendations. One you took action on, that was the school board expansion. And I might add that we did a survey, but only 170 people responded. I was disappointed in that response. But we tried really hard, and I think it's hard to get people to respond. One good way to get people to respond is put something on the ballot, and you'll get a much better response one way or another if you put it on the ballot. So we didn't recommend the number of people. we take that back and give you a number if you want, or you can make that decision yourself. But we would encourage you to offer that up to the public for a vote, either in November, when you would get probably the largest turnout of South Burlington residents, or at town meeting next year. Can I just ask if any of our committee members have anything they'd like to add? Yeah, Wendell, you want to come up here?
Well, as a member of the committee, I certainly was all in favor of expanding the size of the board. I think it puts more voice at the table, and that's a good idea. Speaking for myself and not the committee, I think it would have been great to have wards. I think that would have given maybe no more people than this will, but would have brought a lot more ideas to the table. Thank you.
Paul.
Hi, Paul Ingalls. Like Wendell, supported the idea of wards also. But I think a good start would be, as Peter suggested, to put an item on the ballot, a referendum, to ask the public what they think about expanding. I don't know, you'd have to decide how you want to word that, and if you want to expand it to 7, 9, I don't know, but and it would be great if you could do it. I mean, it's August now. I think you've got time to do that before November. It'd be great to put it out to the public when 75% of the registered voters are voting. We'd get a real sense, I think, of what the public wants. So that would strongly be my recommendation as a ballot item this fall. Thanks.
So can we review what the process would be? Do you mind if we do that now? Like from start to whatever it might be, right? So let me ask, we don't have the city clerk here, but
The
as,
city attorneys.
who?
You have city attorneys.
So maybe the city attorney could comment on the possibility of being able to have language on a ballot in November, but that would require that you have to do some work first,
So
right?
I just want to set the table on this, and Colin and Jared jump in. The unusual thing about the November ballot is that because it's a state state election, ballots are mailed, and I believe the deadline to finalize the ballot is like either this week or next week, and I don't think we can hit the public hearing required process for that.
And that leaves March.
Yeah.
25. Okay. Then that's what I was thinking. That's probably a more logical time to do it, right?
Yep.
So,
And with the school board, what happened with the school board was that we recommended that it go on the ballot, and the city council agreed with that, and the city attorney wrote up the language,
crafted the language
for it.
Right.
Put it in, so.
So that's all we would need to do, pretty much. If we
So
decide.
I think
Go ahead.
I think the question for the council is if you want to move forward with this on the town meeting day ballot, there's two main paths. You can either ask the charter committee to reconvene, go back, have a conversation, make another recommendation, or you can take their previous recommendation and direct myself and Colin to set up the public here, to craft the language, answer some key questions about rolling terms, things like that, and then go through the public hearing process that you all are required to go through to have a charter change. And I think we would have time this fall to do that if you wanted it on the town meeting date ballot. And I don't think you need to recharge the charter committee, but certainly they're here and willing.
Yeah, and I think maybe the only thing you would throw back, and I don't think you need to, would be how big do you expand the council? What number would you put out there? Would it be 2, 1, 4, whatever?
Yeah.
Personally, I'd lean towards 7 people, but that's
I'm just trying to get a sense of the timing, so we've already determined that March is the first available slot, right?
Yeah.
And then what does it take to possibly get there? And then we're going to have a discussion now about whether we want to move forward with this or not. So
Yeah.
Do we want to do that right now and give our opinions on that? So I'll start and say that We can't even get our meetings over by 11:30 with 5 people. So I'm fearful of 7, and I've watched Burlington at 12, and it's like it goes till 2 o'clock in the morning. That's just my fear, right? And so, there's already a lot of time spent here, and I think just more people is more comment, more verbiage, more representation, and I understand that, and I respect that. I just, these are volunteer positions basically, and Burlington pays a lot more money for their counselors than we do. I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining at all.
I have more faith in you as chair to control the meeting.
So I'll let the council discuss. Andrew?
So yeah, so we did discuss this a little bit. It was probably a year ago, and look, generally, I'm kind of all in favor of democracy, right? Yeah, I mean, how could we go wrong with letting the public decide an issue on a ballot? But we do have some obligation to figure out whether it makes sense, right, for that issue to be on the ballot. I tend to agree with Tim. Just going over again the pros and cons in the report, which we discussed the last time about a year ago. My comments will be really similar. I don't really find anything compelling in the pros and cons, which would say we need to expand. And in fact, I kind of feel like the cons are more serious issues than the pros as articulated in the table. I do think deliberations will get bogged down, difficult to reach consensus. I don't know that we'd gain diversity perspective, right? I mean, if it could become less diverse, no one knows if we get 2 more counselors, what perspectives those counselors will represent. So you're not necessarily achieving the goal that you want in any event. And honestly, I think it'd be more work, right? Because right now, a lot of us spend time, kind of chatting. And so now there's more people to chat with, right? And there's more things to consider, more proposals to consider. So, personally, I would not want to serve on a 7-member council, honestly. I think it just would be cumbersome. I suppose for me, what would help me, honestly, is to know for municipalities that are sized like us across the country, what is standard? What is typical? For 20,000 or so person municipalities, it's standard to have 3, 5, 7, 10. What do we see across the country? I don't think we've seen that data. That would kind of maybe help me be more conclusive about how I'd want to go forward. So.
I just might remind you that when we first started with 5, what were we at, 10,000? And now we're up to almost 20,000 people. And we
But
still
again,
have
if that's
5.
typical across the country, that's okay, right? I mean, I just don't know. It kind of feels okay to me, honestly. And I've heard anecdotally for some neighbors, like some communities in New Jersey have rules like under 20,000, most you can have is 3 counselors, and like from 20 to 50, you have 5, over 50, you have 7. I don't know if that's typical though, if that's just anecdotal, right? So I wouldn't mind, honestly, having a little more information in that regard.
Lori?
I'll start by saying I'm not prepared to make a decision on this. At this point, if I was going to make a decision, I would probably be voting for not expanding the council. My understanding is this was brought up last year, brought to the council. The council took action on one of the recommendations, did not take action on this, but as I listened to the deliberations, it sounded clear to me that it was a deliberate decision to not take action. So it seemed that this has already been litigated once. I'm not opposed to considering it, but I would like to either postpone this or reserve judgment. We are going to be having a strategic review meeting next month, and I think that we need to look at what the priorities are for the council and how we decide how to move forward. I'm nervous about having to work with a 7-person council. I think that it's going to get harder to deliberate, harder to make decisions. And whether the representation will be broader or not is certainly not definite. My concern about going to wards is that we are not a partisan city, and I think that makes us all a community. We're not Democrats and Republicans and progressives, we're neighbors. And I think that going to a ward system could cause some of that division within our community. And I hope that everybody that serves on this council is trying to be sensitive to every one of our community members. So I don't know that going to 7 would actually increase that sensitivity. That said, I would like to either say that this has already been answered by our previous council, or have us take it up at our strategic retreat.
Elizabeth?
Thanks, Tim. First off, I did serve prior to being elected to City Council on the Charter Committee and was part of the team that made this recommendation unanimously to expand the council. I do support that expansion, and I think that decision is ready for prime time with the voters. I don't think there's any further discussion at this point relative to the ward discussion. There was no specific recommendation that came out of the committee relative to the ward discussion. If there is work to be done there, I think this council should direct the charter committee in a revised scope to address that, along with any other issues. But I think there was a lot of clarity on expanding the council. I think the information relative to representation on the council based on growth of the city, I think is very relevant to being inclusive and meeting the city plan's goals of inclusivity, as well as the community engagement demands that all of our council members have. There are at least twice as many residents, voting residents in our city versus when the council was formed, and our ability to reach out to the community, seek out feedback, and represent those interests, regardless of a ward system, is diminished by our numbers right now. So it may be more work with 7 members, but I think that is exactly what democracy is. It's representing the community that we serve, and I think a goal would be to improve diversity on the council. I can't guarantee who will volunteer to run, but I do believe 2 more voices represents diversity in and of itself, and I think that deliberation will be more robust because of that. But my opinion is that this is a specific recommendation of the Charter Committee, and taking it to the voters as soon as is reasonably possible is consistent with the committee's recommendation, and I think the voters will weigh in as to how effective we are now and whether or not there's a perceived advantage to expanding the council.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Michael, do you have something you want to say? I don't see a hand up, but I thought I'd give you a chance.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, I also share the view that I think this is a decision, since there was a full recommendation from the Charter Committee that this option should be put forward to our residents. I think it is for them to choose and to decide whether they believe that this will give them greater chance to have their voices heard, greater confidence that a variety of views are being raised on the council. I think the challenge of working with 5 or 7 is really small. I think, if you choose to run for the city council, you're taking on that obligation and welcoming the responsibility that you will have to represent the voices that you've heard in the community. So I don't think, whether our meetings run long or not, and again, it's official and we choose to run them. And I think, in many ways, you get incentivized to be more efficient when you know the time is focused. So I don't think that should at all be a consideration. I think the only consideration should be, are we maximizing the representation opportunities for our residents? We are twice the size of it, as I understand it, in the state of Vermont. Per city council or selectmen, we are at I think probably the highest, if not at the high end, but I think the highest in terms of council person per citizen. So I think, at the end of the day, we are a legislature, we are the house of the people. And I think the opportunity to maximize the possibility of those voices to be heard and to factor into the city that we all live in and we all share ownership for is to me, the correct path to take. I'm ready to support that process right now. Whether we choose to have the charter committee research additional issues, but the ones, as we heard, about having residents have the right to vote, whether we go for a war system, which I do think would have a greater chance of bringing the voices closer to the people. I don't think it'll create a divisive. I think it will enrich the discussion. Or whether we're talking about neighborhood group advocacy, which is another way of having smaller groupings have a voice to help inform city council decisions. So I think anything that strengthens the opportunity to have more voices heard and more ideas heard is the right thing to do, and I strongly support that.
Thanks, Michael. Sure, but you have to go to the microphone.
Well, Mr. Chalding said something to the effect, you kind of chat here. And that is a problem. If you ran your meetings strictly by Robert's Rules of Order, there wouldn't be any chat. There'd be a motion on the floor. People would know what they were talking about. You would get a lot more done in considerably less time. And I'm speaking from years of experience. Thank you.
Thank you. So I appreciate the work that the committee did, and this is the second time we've looked at it. I'm on the fence about it because it seems like there's not a lot of compelling reason based upon the small survey, population that you had. And I realize that that's not a great representation of the community. The next best representation of the community would be a vote, right? So that would give you the real results. And unfortunately, it can't be in November when you're going to have a large turnout, right? But we get a pretty good turnout for town meeting, right? I'm willing to entertain it, right? Because I think we probably need to grow and change over time. And I think there are some, I'm worried about some liabilities in this. I don't want to go into that right now, but I think we should probably move forward with this since the committee has recommended it. And it sounds like Elizabeth and I are in agreement and Mike's in agreement too. I don't know if you want us to try and convince you, or do you want to take a vote on it, or?
If a motion is made and it's seconded, then we take a vote on it. I would, since this is not going to be on the November ballot and we do have some time for conversation, I would encourage us to have a conversation about it at our strategic planning meeting. But that's just my opinion.
And I would love to get some more data.
You want some more data. Does the committee want to do a little bit more background work and come back to us and give us that data?
We can do that to answer Mr. Chong's question. Sure.
Right. So you have three counselors that are interested, right? And one that wants more data and one that wants to wait for the strategic. We can still talk about it at the strategic retreat. All right. So is that satisfactory for you folks?
Yep.
All right. So this is a movement forward. So
would you give us a time frame?
Did you want to say something?
September 11th.
Do we have a time frame?
I do want to acknowledge that Chelsea, the school board chair, is online, and I think it's worth having her comment if we're going to recharge the committee with doing some work. Colin, I think if I'm remembering correctly to last year, we need to start the public hearing process by early December in order to meet the ballot timelines for town meeting day. So I think if the committee did some work to come back to you in mid-October, maybe that might give enough time around Labor Day to schedule a meeting, have a meeting, do some work, and come back?
That sound
I'm
good?
just throwing out ideas here.
No, I think that makes sense.
Can I?
Sure.
Do you
Elizabeth.
agree with that timeline?
Oh, here. City Attorney.
Colin McNeil, City Attorney. Yeah, Jesse, you're
on?
really close.
Is it on?
It's green. Yeah, you're really close. It looks like from my notes from last year, we approved the language. The council approved the language in December and set the public hearings for January. So it gives us a little bit more time than what we were just talking about, but not much.
Okay. Elizabeth?
If it's possible to get, I would prefer if we move that date up so that if it's possible to have the data available for our September 11th retreat and can have the conversation then, I think then we don't risk getting into a tight time frame with the public hearings and getting that ready for ballot ready language in March.
Can we have that by memo? Is that adequate?
So from my personal preference, I would say if you want to hit that timeline, you should not reconvene the charter committee. You should just charge the chair and Ann with doing that research individually and coming back as the leadership of your charter committee.
At what point in time, though?
I mean, I don't know their schedules if they have capacity to do this in the next 2 weeks.
Sure.
At the next meeting?
Thank you.
Well, I think the idea is to come back at the retreat, on the September 11th retreat.
Oh, okay.
Either in person or by memo would be fine from my standpoint.
Yeah.
So just to be real clear for you guys, that means I would need it by September 4th.
Now, just to be clear, questions you'd like us to, we'll look at some things, but one, you wanted some idea of how other communities, the size of their councils or select boards. Can we do New England rather than nationally? And just keep it New York, New England, this Northeast, or what geographic would you like us to look at?
Do your best.
I would pick some states outside New England and New England, just, I mean.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we have Vermont's data already.
We've got a great library right here.
You do?
Yeah.
On it.
Okay. Any other specific questions?
No.
We'll come up with some other things for you, but
Mr. Mittag?
I had a question for Peter and Ann. You only had 107 respondents, is that correct?
170.
170 respondents in your survey. Do you have a breakdown of how the questions were answered?
We have the whole reports on the city website.
Okay.
You can look at that, and in fact, we have written answers, comments from everybody. So it actually was good feedback. But the committee took that and all the hearings that we did and
Understood.
put all that information together and came up with our own recommendation.
Understood. I'd like you to have the benefit of my experience. I served on the Form-Based Code Committee here, which had 16 members. And it took 2 years to do 1 year's of work. I have also chaired our association management committee or board of directors of 10. And generally it took 2 hours to do 1 hour of work. If you have 7 people, you're going to have 7 opinions that have to be discussed and reviewed and settled upon rather than 5. I think it's going to put a lot of extra work on everybody, including Jessie and her staff. And one last thing, I have never felt that this council is unresponsive, whether they're in my district or not. And whenever I've approached any one of you, I've got an answer or a response right away. So I don't think that's an issue. Thank you.
Thank you. So you have enough information to go on? Okay.
Tim, can we discuss just while we have the charter committee senior reps here, a couple other things relevant to the charter committee?
We had two things.
So
in
I know
our-
you put two things on, which we should discuss, and I think it,
If you don't
from my
mind.
perspective, makes sense to probably, change the school board composition if there's no school issues, and if you think the city clerk should be a permanent member, we should just do that. So I want to make sure those were addressed, and I would be in favor of both of those things.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that, and I thought that maybe the council appoints people to the charter committee, and you've turned over that function to the school board to appoint two members to the charter committee. Maybe they should recommend people and you select the people to the charter committee, just to keep your process of appointing city committees. But that's up to you how you go about doing it for the future. Because this was done pretty quickly just to give the school board input into this one issue that was going to affect the school board specifically. That's just my thought, and I've been thinking about that.
Chelsea, are you online? Do you want to comment?
Hi, yes, thank you. This is Chelsea Tillinghast. I currently serve as chair of the South Burlington School Board. I just wanted to say that we really believe that any election changes that might be the result of the committee will affect the school district and affect our kids and families. I can think of several conversation topics that the charter committee might be addressing in the coming years, and the school board would definitely like to have a voice on that committee. I think that there are very few things that the city does that don't impact the school district, and we would definitely appreciate a continued seat at the table to share our perspective. Thank you.
So it doesn't say it's temporary, right? So we'll leave as it is.
So
Assume that
it's for
permanent.
you folks to decide.
Yes, sorry, just to be clear, the way I read it was, are you considering taking those seats off? And so I just wanted to voice that the board would very much appreciate to continued seats at the table. Thanks.
We don't want to change anything. We leave the two school board appointed members on the committee.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And yeah, the second question was whether the city clerk should be a permanent member of the charter committee. And it makes a lot of sense. Donna Kinville certainly gave us a wealth of information and her experiences. And it was very helpful when we were discussing wards and really every question. So it would be terrific if the clerk or somebody she designates could be.
Yeah, I would definitely support that. I think the clerk's perspective on a lot of the issues that the charter committee addressed at the time, and I would assume in the future, are very relevant.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, so we don't need a motion. We have a direction, right?
So, Tim, can I raise one more thing?
Yep.
So, we received a letter from Chris Shaw, the chair of the South Burlington Democratic Committee, asking the council to request that the charter change committee consider allowing folks who are here legally in the U.S. and that are residents of South Burlington, but today are not citizens, so wouldn't have the right to vote in federal or state elections, to consider whether those folks should have voting rights in our municipal elections. And I would be in favor of the charter committee examining that and reporting back to the council on that question.
I agree with that.
I'll agree with that. Elizabeth?
I think one of the issues is we made a decision when we were interviewing for charter committee members to postpone filling those based on redefining any required expanded scope of the charter committee. So I think we may need to revisit filling the charter committee seats before we go beyond what the current recommendations are. If there's a new charge.
Right, because there are how many members right now total?
7 now? I think.
7, I think.
7?
5 with the 2 school board members.
Right, okay.
And now, you just said the clerk. Would you name a person as a person, or would it take a formal resolution or charter change to make the clerk part of the charter committee? That's something you've got to, not tonight
So-
probably, but
So I think we're talking about two separate things here. I think in terms of charter committee composition, the council can decide that with new committee appointments. And you're right, you do still have 2 vacancies on the charter committee. I think if you are asking them to do a new thing, right now the charter committee is a standing committee, but only convenes when the council asks them to do something. So right now they're still operating under your 2022 charge of look at governance models. If you wanted them to look at all resident voting, I think the cleanest way to do that would be to pass another resolution with that charge, where you could outline the city clerk by title and some 2 school board members and other things as we did in the 2022 resolution. So I think if that's something the council wants us to do, that's an easy resolution to draft and bring to you.
Paul?
I happened to talk to Donna Kinville on election day, and she said that she has been a member of the charter committee as a resident. She's never been a member of the charter committee as the city clerk. So it would be a precedent for you to establish to require that the city clerk be a part of the charter committee. Donna seems to think that would be a good idea for the same reasons that I think members of the council here have outlined tonight. But yeah, that would definitely be something I think you would have to do a charter change. No, I don't know, but that's the current situation is Donna was as a resident, not as the clerk. But it's important to have the clerk on the charter committee.
Right, right. So I like the idea of the resolution.
Do we need to make a motion to have the resolution, or you'll just go and do it?
I hear a majority of you saying resolution.
Yes.
Yes, I can just do it.
So that's the direction. Okay. All right, well, thank you very much for coming
Thank
tonight.
you for your
Appreciate it.
time.
Appreciate your time. We're going to move on to item number, I'm not scratching these off fast enough, 12, which is receive an update on pickleball operations at Szymanski Park and possibly approve a fund balance request for sound mitigation. Adam Math, Director of Recreation and Parks. Good evening, Adam.
Okay, so after the meeting on the 15th, I was asked to provide some additional information around sound readings, sound options, as well as court usage. So I went to Szymanski Park after we got a sound reading machine 14 different times with various times during the day, in the morning, afternoon, as well as in the evening. Found on average the number of courts which were used came out to 1.35 courts. Took measurements from 3 different areas while I was there. One was right outside the courts. On average, the sound reading came out to 63.19 dBA. Took measurements in the parking lot. That came out to, on average, 46.2. And then also went to the exterior of the park, kind of in the tree shrub line. And that came out to 51.4. The only thing to note on this is the sound readings weren't able to differentiate any ambient park noise. I mean, it's reading everything. As we actually went closer to the exterior in the marsh, it started hearing all the chirping and noises from there. Additionally, since this conversation started in the Park and Rec committee, or as early as kind of beginning of May, I had been frequenting Szymanski Park and went roughly 15 times in the evening to look at the light usage and how often the lights were on and used and not. And I provided you guys with that information in the memo. As far as sound barrier solutions, I got quotes, which I received from 6 different, actually 5 different ones, and I'm waiting on an exact quote from a 6th. They recommended covering roughly about 2/3 of the fencing around the pickleball sides of the courts, if that was something we were looking to do. And it ranged, as you can see, the low was $17,000. The high was a $30,000 quote, with a variety of different reduction levels. Some not 100% guaranteeing what they're able to do. Others were purely tested on the lab side of things. And then I also listed out a few other kind of conservative alternatives which could be used, whether it's shrubs and trees, or also requiring a different type of ball being used at the courts. But from like my opinion of how often I've been there, how many courts are being used when I am there, and the different sound readings which I receive, it wouldn't be my recommendation to spend that amount of money on a sound barrier solution as far as netting.
Can you tell me where you were when you took the exterior park reading again?
The exterior park one, so I was basically, if you remember when you saw me there, kind of where you were standing.
At the very edge of the fence to the stormwater pond?
Yeah, exactly.
On the Stonehenge side?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's where those readings were?
Yep. And then the ones right outside the court were basically right outside the gate.
And the parking lot was out by the porta potty, probably?
Yep.
Or?
Yep.
Was it, just to be clear, so you weren't on the pickleball side of the stormwater. You were on the far side of
No,
the stormwater.
I was on the Szymanski Park side.
Past the basketball court?
Yep, past the basketball court, and there's some small
Right,
little.
but were you behind? I'm just asking. Was the reading behind the stormwater near Stonehenge, or was on the pickleball side?
On the pickleball side. There's
So you'd imagine if you were kind of closer to the homes on the other side, the readings might be even slightly reduced.
Yeah.
No.
Can you just tell us what equipment you used to measure that? I'm just curious.
Yep. So it was a sound reading meter, which DPW has ordered. I don't know the exact model, but I can provide it. And these were when I did take the reading, I was taking the max of what's heard at that location.
Was that the I know the technical LF max, which is the 1/8 second reading? Do you know? Is that or?
I can get you that info.
Okay.
So I find it amazing that after that meeting that I must have gotten 4 emails about products that can attenuate ball sounds if you hang them on the fence. Did you get them too? Yeah. So I was like, so somebody's out there got a social media scraper, right, for whatever, and just inundated me with all these advertisements. Dear Mr. Barrett, our product is the best. I was really surprised. So, but good for them for being able to pick up on these situations and trying to push their product. I don't blame them. And I did take a quick drive up to the edge at Grandview, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they have some courts behind their building, and they have some blue mats or blue material that's on the exterior fence, and then they have another set of blue material that's just around the courts themselves, I think, so that the balls don't get away.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't seem very substantial. It just seemed like basically a heavy blue nylon.
Yeah, so that was the in the list of quotes. It was the Acoustablock, which is what they have there.
Which one is it again?
The second one, Acoustablock.
That's Acoustablock.
$30,000 one.
One of the expensive ones.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Adam, would it be reasonable to conclude that at any particular home in Stonehenge, the decibel readings would be no more than the readings that you measured? From the exterior park readings?
From the park noise, yeah. I mean, when you're taking a reading at your home, again, you're going to be getting...
Right, there may be someone in the street driving, there may be other noises.
From the pickleball noise
From the
itself.
pickleball noise?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So, I mean, I'm not a noise expert, but you know, the numbers that what they show is that as you get further away from the courts, right, the readings go down. Of course, then it also depends upon, I mean, how many people are playing at one time and whether they're screaming and yelling, right? Whether they have padded rackets or not, because you said that there is some kind of a covering.
Nobody uses them.
You never did that? You never told us that?
No, I
There
have used
are-
it, but nobody
Yeah.
does use them. It affects the
No.
play.
Oh,
Yeah, there's
well,
different
won't find anybody
paddles
using
and balls, but no one.
Yeah.
okay. I have gone there several times, and I've heard that some paddles are noisier than others. I don't know why, but I have heard that. Right. So, what we have is the dials that we have to control, right, are hours of usage, lights, possible noise abatement through material that could be attached to the fence, which would have to be taken down in the wintertime to
Yeah,
preserve its
I mean,
condition.
all of them are attached by grommets. I mean, that was another thing that I do have. Some of them wouldn't say exactly how long, like they would last because they are a new product. But again, it was roughly 5 to 10 years,
Right.
that these were lasting.
You don't
But
want to leave them in
they
the
would-
sun all winter time. All long, yeah.
No, I mean, it wouldn't be something that would be worth keeping out in the winter.
And we don't have. We wish we could do a test with this, but I don't know how because they're not going to.
No, that.
Not going to give us anything to test it with.
Adam, do you have a sense if we were to plant arborvitae, you know, along the between the shared use path and the pickleball court? There's like a 10-foot strip of grass. So if you planted kind of a tight row or two of arborvitae, and acknowledging it would take a few years for that arborvitae to grow tight and tall, whether that would have any impact on the noise? Do you have a sense of that?
I mean, I think it would help, and I did talk to Tom about that kind of window between the courts and the shared use path, and he did say it was something that they could get.
The beauty of that
those
is
in
no
there.
maintenance. You have to take
I mean,
it
they're
down.
and I mean, you can get them based off of what I was just briefly looking at. You can get them starting roughly 5 to 6 feet tall. So it's kind of there. They grow about a foot a year is what I've been seeing.
So in
and
5
it would
years,
be
you'd have maybe a
very
pretty
reasonable
thick layer.
The 5 to 6 feet run roughly $200 for each one.
Does the council have any interest in adjusting the hours?
Yes.
I was going to say 5 years of mitigation in 5 years sounds like a real problem for the residents that are experiencing distress right now. Looking at the hours, it seems like given how little it's used after 8 o'clock at night, having lights turn off at 8 o'clock at night would maybe not make any difference, but I don't see why we wouldn't do that. And somehow I think we need to provide some kind of relief until we find other solutions. And as you said, the dials we have are hours of use, lights, and noise mitigation. Other than moving the courts, which is not something that's going to happen anytime soon.
And the lights only affect the pickleball courts. Does it affect the basketball court too, or?
So the basketball courts don't have.
So the lights
have
are just
so
for
it's
the
just the
field
tennis and pickleball. Yeah.
And I think you said before that when they push the button,
It's
the latest that they can push it would be 9:30 to have it shut off
Currently,
at 10
yeah.
o'clock. It's a half-hour
Yep.
timer, right?
Yep.
Okay. So we have the ability to reprogram that, right? And make the latest shut off could be 7:30.
I mean,
let's say.
yeah, you could during the June, July months. That's
Well, you have
not going to super
right.
help, but yeah, I mean, I could adjust the dial.
Right. But then the hours right now for use of those courts, right? Either tennis or pickleball is 7 to 9.
10.
7 to 10.
7 to 10
So
with lights. Yeah.
I would propose we change it from 8 to 7 if that's. Or,
I would say
maybe
9
for
to 8.
discussion.
9 to 8.
9
9 a.m.
to
to 8 p.m.
9
to 7.
9
As
to
far as
7? So I'm just
turning off
asking-
the lights or
No,
at
talking about
7?
like,
setting
you
the
can't,
hours.
we can't enforce it, but we said that we can change the hours and we post the hours, right? And the pickleball community was very adamant with us that they're tight knit and they would follow the rules. Correct? Remember when they were here before, how much they communicate with each other? So,
Yeah.
you know, so if we post it, that's the rule, whatever those new hours are, instead of being 7 to 10. So,
So just to set another way, if we can certainly do that, we're going to install signage and they're going to self-enforce. We do not have
I mean, we understand
Yes.
that.
capacity.
Yes.
Yeah. But I mean, we already see that the usage is not that high for the dates that you went. You know, of course, there could be dates that it was packed. I don't know, but this is a sampling, right?
Let me,
Mike,
if I can
do you
ask a
wanna say
question.
something?
Yes, have you ever taken a reading when the courts are all in use? Just out of curiosity, to Tim's point. What is the sound volume when 4 courts are in full use? Do we have any idea?
There's one.
It's right there.
There's
Mike.
one.
There's
Yeah, it would
one
have
row.
been August
There was
5th
one?
at 9 a.m. I mean, the volume doesn't like drastically
Changed
change
by the
because
number
people
of
aren't hitting
courts
the
being used?
ball at the same time. So it's not a drastic change.
Right, right. Because
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
I mean, it's
same
reading
Thanks.
noise, just
roughly.
more frequent.
Yeah.
Right, right. Okay.
I think it would be important to find out when you were using your meter, whether you were getting an LMAX reading. Because the LMAX reading is the instantaneous noise. And if you're getting an average over a minute or an average over an hour, then that reading is dramatically different. And the impact of the pickleball is that it's like a gunshot. So you need the instantaneous reading from your meter.
Well, just to clarify, there's 2 max. I think Adam said he took the max noise, but there's 2. There's the instantaneous,
Yeah.
and then the L max noise is actually over 1/8 of a second,
Yes.
which is I think the industry standard way of measuring maximum noise, 1/8 of a second. So I'd be interested in understanding exactly what the measurement was in that regard.
Okay.
But I don't think that the neighbors that have brought these concerns are imagining their experience. So, regardless as to what the decibel readings are saying, we have an issue that we need to figure out how to solve. And starting with setting up time limits, I think is a place to start. And I think getting the light to go off earlier would be a good thing to do as well.
Do we want to?
As well as, I think, making a commitment to a longer term solution. I know that's not but Lori's talking about is trying to show that there's an effort to immediately limit unpleasantness that some people have expressed, but also show that there's a commitment to find a longer term solution, though it may not be immediate, but it is something that I think we need to commit for. Because I think I assume when the decision was taken, I do not know if discussions were had with the immediate surrounding to sort of forewarn or foregauge, what the sense would be to that change. And I assume also when we go forward to have a grand review of our open space and open rec, we will be considering what is the demand for pickleball use in the city, and how do we, in a proactive way, make decisions on what we wanted in a longer term that will minimize the inconvenience that may exist, or at least perceived by some who live in proximity of where these courts will be.
Do we want to hear from the public? Well, before Michael, is anybody else behind you who?
Just a point of clarification.
Yeah.
It's my understanding that all parks
Hold on.
should close at dusk.
Say again.
It's my understanding that the city requires that all parks close at dusk. So I'm not sure why you're talking about when the lights go on and off.
Well, I mean, these are the hours that we have posted on that particular court right now. Yeah. Yeah.
Linda Norris, I think, wants to speak.
Oh, Lynn.
Hi, Tim again. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you turn your camera on if you'd like to?
I've been trying to, and I once again have a little bit of
you
an
don't
issue.
have to. It's okay.
You probably don't want to see me at this hour. Anyway, I'm eating my cereal dinner. I hope you guys have had dinner. I just wanted to pipe in on the pickleball. I'm hoping in the master plan, which I think Adam and his team have been working on for sure, that has more pickleball courts available to put in the right spot if we need to help this noise abatement kind of issue. The other thing to consider, though, it is only 6 months a year right now that we're having the issue. And I don't know how, I mean, I know $30,000 is a lot for the fencing, but maybe there's a lower cost solution to help the neighbor or neighbors that are having the noise problem. Just wanted to pass that on. There are, two, I know they're not being used yet, but there's a lot of technology being worked on the balls. And there are 2 paddles, one from Owl and one from Hush. Note the names are trying to put out a softer noise kind of abatement paddle. So maybe in the evenings, people will start using those down the road. I don't know, but they're not being popular yet. Just wanted to pass that on.
Thank you, Linda. Somebody wanted to come up? Come on down. While he's coming down, if we bought a bunch of blue tarps, and could we do a test because the tarps don't cost that much, right? But if we bought like a couple $100 worth of tarps, not the expensive kind, and hung them and did the test again, right? If we had players, is that something that we could think about, or
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't
Maybe
know.
you could try it.
Well, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Can you please come to the microphone and identify yourself and get close to the
My name is
microphone?
Bill Stanley, and I am a pickleball player. Back up in the other side are a couple of real champions. It kind of confounds me that there's so much reaction to what I understand is basically one person making a complaint. And on the other side is dozens and dozens of pickleball players that you're talking about restricting their access. I think there's some sense in maybe closing at 9 o'clock at night because people are up at 9 o'clock at night. And maybe you're looking for some rest. But going to 9 o'clock in the morning when everybody's been up for a couple hours or an hour and a half doesn't make any sense to me. And so I just want you to keep things in perspective. That's all I'm asking.
Thank you. That's what we're trying to do and be fair. Anybody else? Okay, and nobody online. Now we can see Linda.
Just us, though.
Say again?
Just us. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. You can't see. You can only, anyway. So, yeah, the tarp thing. I mean, I'd hate to spend $30,000.
I think if you're going to do sound mitigation, do sound mitigation. Don't spend $2,000 to then spend $15,000.
I know, but we could take.
Plus,
the tarps
it's
back.
staff time. It's
Yeah, right.
You can't take tarps back.
No, you just buy them and you take them back. They didn't work. Sure.
I can't help but think, I mean, if you're looking at just the data, it would suggest we wouldn't have to do anything based on some normal sound levels. Yet the sense I'm getting with the variety of levers that we can pull is sort of, let's run it up the flagpole and see who salutes. But I do feel that the feedback, regardless of, the number of folks who have said it or things like that, I think the noise, and we've all heard it to one degree or another, but not necessarily had to live near it, for the hours that the courts are being used, can be very annoying because of its chronic or its kind of consistent and nature. So I am inclined to look at kind of the lights, the hours. I actually think if we can start to think, I think Mike brought up a good point about the longer term master plan and sort of where we place courts. But I would even consider the investment in shrubs sort of do that now in the event that, you know, longer term it contributes to the noise remediation. But I think I would be, as Jesse just said, I do think I'd be inclined to do the sound mats on the side that is, at least on that side that is, which I think is what you quoted, Adam, in here. It wasn't the
Yes,
full
it wasn't
court.
full. So it was like the Stonehenge side, the entry level side, or like the entrance side,
Mhm.
and then about a quarter of the back corner behind the pickleball courts.
Yeah,
Is
I
what
guess I'd
the-
just say selective
Yeah,
placement
it wasn't
of the
the
sound
whole
mats.
It's a little
entire
over
thing.
half.
I would be a little weary in the fact that you could then have neighbors on the other side start
I know.
complaining, and then you're gonna have the whole thing. Additionally, on the lights, JC lights are on, so is that going to be another part to dial back the lights as well? Because we have football there, which those lights are on till 10 o'clock.
If we start getting complaints there, we might need to. But I will say that 10 hours of pickleball a day seems to me to be a pretty good quantity of time for people to be able to play pickleball. And if that provides some relief to the neighbors who are upset, that may be worth a try to at least see if that makes a difference.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes,
Given that we have LDRs and
yes.
collective bargaining agreements still on your agenda. I really hope folks get engaged through the Parks and Open Space Master Plan, because I think we have a real conflict in our community about how we provide community connection in our public spaces. And if we're going to start limiting that, then we need to do that eyes wide open and what we're going to lose.
Yep.
Somebody could make a motion about what you would like us to sign and self-enforce.
So, just before we do the motion, I think if we limit it to 7 p.m., we're not going to get compliance. People come after work, 6:30, they want to play an hour and a half or so. I think it needs to be 9 a.m. to 8. I don't think we need to change the lighting. I think we just need to post the time for pickleball. We can keep the lighting consistent with all the other parks. I think if we make it 8 p.m., people will comply. I want to remind folks that the majority of complaints we received were actually not about the sound. The majority of complaints we received were about traffic and parking, because that affects much more of the community. And I think from that perspective, what we should do is hang a sign on the pickleball court, a map, which has stars that indicate alternate places that people can park. And there's at least 4 that I can think of. On Laurel Hill Drive, Overlook Park, Deerfield Road, Stonehenge Drive, little stars with a note that we please encourage, folks using these courts to find alternate parking at the places starred above. And I think people, if there was that map and that note, that people would do that. The other thing I think we should do, which will, I think, mitigate all of this, is have a limitation on group size to 10 folks, so that you don't have 20 folks, say, coming down all at once and really monopolizing that whole system there. I think if we limited the group size, you'd have less traffic, you'd have less noise, and that park would then still be available for the community and the kids to use.
Andrew, would you be willing to make a motion?
I can.
Let's make a motion just on time, hours of operation, because that's a very simple thing to make a new sign, put it on the fence, boom. it's
Okay,
done.
well, so I move to limit the pickleball hours from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Mike, do you hear us?
Tim, can I just clarify how that coincides with the dawn to dusk current hours on parks?
I don't think there was an issue there anyway, because it had separate different hours because of the activity that was
Where we
permitted.
have parks that are active recreation, that doesn't apply.
Okay, so that.
So, Mike,
You're
we can't,
muted,
you're
Mike.
still muted. So, you're muted.
I'm trying, Tim.
We can hear you now.
Here
Now
you
we
go.
can't see you. There we go.
I'm in someone else's place, so. But are we not also all in agreement, at least to start the process of a natural barrier that would be there as well as a sign of a commitment to try to find, maybe not immediately, but a long-standing solution to the process, just to get the ball rolling on that front. I think there will be some more discussions on the sound mitigation. It is unfortunate that, I also sort of think if we could do part of it, but I think Adam does have a point. And, you do half of it, goes back to Jesse's question. You have to either do it all or not. I would say, but at least if we're going to do a motion to show that we're taking action, which I think we should limit the time. I agree, but also make a commitment to advance already with longer term solution and to be sure that this issue is addressed in a comprehensive way for us in the city plan in terms of, the Parks and Recs and open space plan.
Thanks, Mike. The acoustic block and the mats, that's a secondary item that I don't think we can address tonight because we don't have time, but we're going to take this action tonight to get something moving, and we'll have to work on that in the future and have maybe a landscaping recommendation. I don't know who would handle that, but we'll look into it, right? It's going to take a few years for arborvitae to grow up to 20 feet and try to block that noise. So we have a motion. Ready for the vote? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Mike?
Aye.
That was an aye?
1 second, aye.
Okay, so it's unanimous.
So
Thanks for your work,
just
Adam.
to confirm, 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. Are we changing the lights or no?
I think you'll leave the lights alone for now.
Okay.
Right? If we get
And-
further complaints, we can deal with that.
Are
But
we asking for Adam to come back with a recommendation and cost for doing plantings?
Yeah, I can do that.
And if you can get anybody to give you experience with the acoustic mats, some kind of reference, from somebody that actually has them and they can say that they worked, how well they worked, that'd be great.
Can we do that as part of the FY26 budget?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, moving on to,
Thank you, Adam.
thank you. Item 13, potential action, hold a first reading of land development regulation amendments, L.D.R 24-01 to L.D.R 24-10, as recommended by the Planning Commission and related to the requirements of Acts 47 and 18 and city goals on housing, climate change, and transportation, and set a public hearing on September 16, 2024 at 7 p.m. No Paul Connor, but
No,
in his
Paul,
place.
No. Paul Connor's here. He's
Where?
on.
Where?
He's online.
Oh, there he is.
He's on vacation this week.
He's got too many New York Yankees things in that room. I object.
He's on vacation and
Oh.
he's here at a council meeting.
Oh,
Let's be nice to
okay.
him.
All right, we'll be nice.
And you're backlit.
Yeah,
I realize that. I'm not sure that I can solve that particular problem, but you know what I look like.
Yes.
Good evening, Paul.
Good evening, folks. Duncan McDonald is here as Vice Chair of the Planning Commission. I've also seen Paul Engels and Michael Matag. I'm not sure if any other commissioners are here, but I just wanted to say welcome to all of them.
Helen is
What
here
you have
too,
in front
Paul.
of you, pardon me?
Helen is here as well.
Oh, great. And Helen Reilly. What you have in front of you is a big package of amendments, 10 of them in total, that the Commission's been working on over the last 9 months or so. And as you can see in your packet, there's a lot of different information. We can speak briefly to any of that if you'd like this evening. As talked about with Chair Barrett, the recommendation is that Jessica give a full presentation on September 16th. She was not available this evening to do that. So that was our recommendation. Our other recommendation is for you to warn the public hearing this evening for September 16th. Just a reminder that for LDRs, they take effect pending council action when they are warned. So this gives a little bit more predictability to the to folks who might be applying under applications to know what set of regulations they're under. If ultimately you approve the regulations, then those that were reviewed during the pending time would be would proceed. And if you were to change the regulations or reject them for whatever reason, then folks who maybe would have the ability to be re-reviewed under the old regulations free of charge under state law. So it protects the city's interest to have your hearing warned as quickly as possible.
Paul, would you like me to go over the themes that we had talked about, or would you like to do that? I'm happy to do it.
No, go ahead, Duncan.
Yeah, so thanks for letting me follow pickleball. LDRs. I'll just give you some bullet points on the different themes in these LDRs, and then if there's any high-level questions, we can talk about those. The Commission worked on these amendments for about 9 months, and more in some cases. Certainly staff did. We had 3 listening sessions and a public hearing, as well as various public meetings. The amendments are organized into 3 themes and 10 topics to make them accessible. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to go on the city website, but kudos to Paul Engels here. He's been pushing staff for a long time to give us kind of a layman's version of the LDRs. And if you haven't read it, I would highly recommend going on it. You click the attachment, and I forget, it's the second to last column over. I forget to highlight, but it's very well done. It just gives you in real simple, plain language what the LDR is, what the changes are, how it meets the city comp plan, and any other tentacles involved in it. The 3 broad themes: transportation, thriving neighborhoods, Act 47 and 181. As you know, the state made some changes, and then streamlining and process improvements. Under transportation, again, just some real high-level bullet points. Removes the traffic overlay district, which for the past 25 years has put a cap on total vehicle trips and therefore development per parcel on Wollaston Road, Shelburne Road, and northern portion of Dorset Street. Was identified several years ago as counter to our community development, redevelopment objectives. Replaces citywide level of service standard with one that separates our core areas from the rest of the city, and establishes a new transportation demand management, TDM, if you like acronyms. A point system for investing in a transportation system to support multiple modes of transportation. The second theme, thriving neighborhoods, Act 47, Act 181, meets and exceeds requirements of Acts 47 and Act 181 to support new housing. That was one of the things we talked about quite a bit. I know, Lori, I think you were still on the commission when we talked about it. Our regulations in South Burlington weren't that far off from what the state had mandated in a lot of places. And I think where possible, we thought about what we could do to exceed the state regulations and meet our city goals. And I think staff has done a great job with that. Also with Thriving Neighborhoods, aligns with our 2024 city plan to support thriving neighborhoods, simplifies density calculations. If you ask me about density, I will decline to answer anything. Focus on building types, consolidates most low-scale districts to simplify regulations, aligns the water and sewer services that you guys reviewed this summer, allows for limited neighborhood-scale retail and service activities in certain residential areas along collector and arterial roads, removes density caps in high-scale areas, removes the conservation PUD and makes the TND PUD optional, better aligns to subdivision standards, coordinates inclusionary zoning requirements with state incentives. And the last thing, streamlining and process. Simplified the subdivision master plan and PUD process, streamlined submittal requirements for the master plan, consolidates like zoning districts where applicable. I think that's a big plus for the city. I hope you guys do too. Coordinates DRB waiver and modification processes, coordinates TDR and inclusionary zoning bonuses into a single set of height lot coverage benefits. And this is a big one. In total, reduces draft LDR by 48 pages. A week's worth of reading. So those are kind of the overarching themes.
Was that 148 pages?
No, just 48. I wish. Paul, I don't know if there's anything you want to add. Again, this is just high level. I mean, I'm sure you guys have read every single word of these. But again, I can't say enough. It was really good to see, and again, I'll give
shout out to Paul Engels here. He's been calling it forward for how many years? To see a plain language version of it that's very accessible to just somebody to read. Go, what is this? Paul, I don't know if you have anything you want to add.
No, that was a great summary. Thank you, Duncan.
Hey, Paul, we're functioning with a small handicap tonight in that we can see you, but nobody else in the audience can see you.
Okay, so I will not just shake my head. I will say, thank you, Duncan. I have nothing to add.
I don't know if you guys have any broad level questions. I know that I believe at your next meeting, Paul, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Jessica is going to give a pretty thorough rundown of these.
On September 16th, yes.
Yep.
Do you have any questions?
I will, but should we hear from the public first?
Is there anybody? Oh, you're raising your hand, Michael. You're on the planning commission, aren't you? Come on up.
I'm also not on the planning commission. Depends what I have to say. Michael Mittag, and I'd like to talk to you about the minimum residential density, that is section or article 15A G. 15A 08G. It's on page 257 of the package, if you want to look at it.
So you're speaking as an individual now?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
The requirement for a minimum density, a residential density, is problematic. It imposes or it interferes with a landowner's right to do the things that he or she wants to do. And in this case, it's forcing a landowner to do something that they don't want to do. Let's say a landowner has 10 acres and wants to develop 3. He is forced to, he can leave the other 7 undeveloped, but has to submit a master plan for the entire property. So it may be that he wants to build 5 or 6 homes on the 3 acres, and then for the remaining 7, he has to build maybe 6. He has to commit to build in the future, or not to build, but he has to submit a master plan for the entire property. And submitting a master plan is no small thing. It's expensive and unnecessary. I can't see the justification for forcing a landowner to do this. There's a workaround, and that is to submit a plan for the entire property, the 3 acres and the remaining 7. Submit a master plan. Don't build anything on the 7 acres, and 10 years later, submit the master plan again. The same thing. That's not really a workable solution for a landowner. So I think I'm now a planning commissioner. I think we got it wrong. I'm now Michael Mittag. And I'm not sure why we didn't pick up on it, but it really is not an acceptable way to encourage development. I think this will be a disincentive for a landowner because of the cost of a master plan. And the disincentive will result in less housing. They may not build anything at all because of the cost. So I think the council should reconsider this particular section, Article 15A 8G, and ask the Planning Commission to review it. And in my view, it should be removed and replaced with something else that doesn't force a landowner to do what he doesn't want to do.
Thank you. Anybody online? Is there anybody online? That's there. Okay. Nobody. Anybody online have a comment? Nobody else in the house? All right.
To reply to Michael, I was not at that meeting on July 30th where the vote was taken to push these LDRs forward to the council, although I believe it wasn't a unanimous vote. So I can't really speak to what Michael was talking about. I don't know, Paul, if you have any thoughts on that.
I'm happy to share thoughts if council would like me to, but I'll let council have the discussion and happy to provide council with any feedback that they're interested in.
Well, let's hear it now.
I guess, Paul, you and I had a conversation real quickly, and I think you had a good point about.
Sure. So
Yeah.
I guess what I would say is there's a policy balance that the city needs to and is wrestling with and has wrestled with in the past of with the remaining proportion of land that is unbuilt in the city, which is total. I think from the city plan, 7 or 8% of the total land area of the city is unbuilt and designated for potential development. So it's not a large proportion, but how should that land be used? And in what way should it be enabled to be used and or required? The current regulations do have a master plan requirement, do have minimum density within the various PUDs that are required at 4 or more acres. So this is not a policy change from that, though the tools are a little bit different and the thresholds are a little bit different. Ultimately, I think there's a challenge here of both the efficiency of use of land that the city needs to wrestle with, and so if somebody chooses to build in a way that is not an efficient use of land, is that acceptable to the city? Or if they build in bits and pieces and sort of box themselves into a corner, is that acceptable to the city? I think that there is a tension between sometimes a large piece of land is owned by a developer who is interested in building some or all of the land, and what they're motivated by the market, which may or may not align with necessarily everything that the city is trying to achieve. And sometimes a large piece of land is owned by an individual who is not necessarily a developer. The draft regulation creates a one-time carve out of the master plan for up to 2 acres. And within that 2 acres, the applicant can do as they choose. There's no magic to that threshold, although it is tied into other rules in the regulations. What's challenging is zoning can't say this is the tool used when a landowner is a developer, and this is the tool that is used when the landowner is a landowner. And of course, that could change at any time for any given piece of land. So there are other tools in the toolbox that could be considered if this is not the right mix for you all. And certainly we'd be happy to explore them either for you, or if you assign the Planning Commission to explore it, then you're welcome to do that. I guess that's what I would say for now.
Was there feedback from particular individuals when you were looking at these changes, from either the development community or otherwise, or from large landowners?
I actually was not at any of the listening sessions. Sorry, Tim. But I don't know, Paul or either of you gentlemen, were you?
There was feedback specifically about the traditional neighborhood development, which has in the draft become optional as a tool. It was at one point possibly mandatory above a certain threshold. Some of the feedback provided was that infrastructure costs for smaller and medium-sized properties in the 10-acre range have become substantially higher. And so that was a factor of some of the feedback. Anecdotally, we have seen a combination of the different types of property owners. There's about 10 or 11 properties that have more than 10 acres of developable land that are residentially zoned. So it's not a huge pot. Of those, some of them are owned by folks in the development community. Some of them are owned by individuals. Some are sort of somewhere in between those two. So it's we didn't get a ton of specific feedback, but we have heard a little bit of all sides of it.
But I'm sorry, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, the minimum density provision, which Michael referred to, I think was just introduced and discussed at that very last meeting before the planning commission voted to send the LDRs to council. At least I'd been following along. I hadn't seen it before then.
Right. So yes and no. So yes, that provision was introduced to the last one. However, previously the traditional neighborhood development TND planned unit development type was mandatory, and that one had its own minimum density in it above a certain threshold. So I think
you had the conservation
thresholds
PUD.
are not exactly the same.
No, but you had the conservation PUD where you had the minimum density with 70% was protected, right? And the draft that eliminated that provided minimum density across the parcel.
Yes, and for a period of time in one of the drafts when the conservation PUD was eliminated, it still said that a PUD was mandatory, and so it defaulted to the traditional neighborhood, which also has its own minimum. So this was trying to address some of those side effects by replacing the mandatory TND with having a density. If the
I guess I'm referring to the law that was in effect,
right?
Not the multiple.
Yep.
drafts.
So the law that was in effect had a minimum density in the buildable area, both of the TND and the conservation PUD today.
I have a question, Paul, with the 2 acre exemption. If someone chooses that, do they have to do a master plan for the whole 10 acres?
No, so let's say you've got 10 acres and you choose to carve out 2 acres. So at the time that you do that, you would you have no requirements on your 2 acres other than to show that it's accessible. You can then subdivide it further however you choose it. Those 2 acres are never subject to a master plan. At the time that you create the 2 and the 8 acre lot, you need to show for the 8 acres, you do not have to do a master plan, but you would need to show that the property can still be accessed and built at the density. It's not a development plan, but it's a demonstration of how the development could be achieved, keeping in mind that in the draft, a fourplex can be on a 5,000 square foot lot. And so if you had 8 acres of developable land, it doesn't take a lot to demonstrate that you could put a little road that achieves this. It's really to make sure that you're not designing those 2 acres in such a way as that you've cut off future potential for the city.
Yeah.
So it's not a master plan at that time. If later then you come in to build on those 8 acres or some portion of them, then you would be subject to the master plan. Like I said, if the council is interested in some other tools in the toolbox to address this, then certainly we can bring some options or ideas either to yourselves or to the commission. But that's the draft as presented.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, do you have any questions?
No, I have also been sitting in on the planning commission meetings to try to familiarize myself a little bit more with these LDR changes. I concur with you that this is one I didn't hear till the last meeting. Not that I honestly would have recognized it as being new, but I know it came up in a question prior to the council meeting as well. I don't know the implications, Paul, of this that you're sort of suggesting there may be alternatives to that. So, and then Michael, you sort of said you think the planning commission got it wrong when you stepped out of your, community member. I guess to me, it's enough of a question to ask, maybe in the context of Jessica's presentation, that I would like an understanding prior to that as to what the implications are of this particular language. And obviously, a lot of the planning commission supported it. So kind of the pros and cons from that standpoint.
I mean, even if we were to go ahead and pass a motion to set the September 16th date, right? In that whole process, I mean, they can always go back and look at it again. Right.
Can we, Tim? Can we just get a view of what that process is? Do we, the council, need to make changes, or can we send it back to the planning commission? What is the process for
Sure.
making a change here?
So procedurally, good question. Procedurally, it is in the hands of the council right now. So the tools that you could have is that you yourselves could make changes. You could request that the planning commission make recommendations to you of changes. You could have staff do it directly with you, or you could reject the changes altogether, which would put them back to the beginning. There's not a procedure in the state law for you to hand the LDR back to them, but you could say, we would like your recommendations for changes if you wanted to do that.
So my perspective would be to ask for that. And let me just make a comment. So, what the LDRs do is reserve some of our land as conserved land when that land satisfies a very high bar that allows a municipality to regulate it as conserved. The rest of the land, which we're calling buildable, has not satisfied that very high bar. But it's not like it's, asphalt, right? It can be a meadow, it can be trees. And like an individual landowner may want, if they own 10 acres, to have 5 acres of meadow still there and build on the other 5. And it feels to me extremely coercive to tell that landowner that they need to have a plan to develop all 10, when what they would like to do is set aside 5 and not build on it. And acknowledging that the 5 they are going to build on does have to satisfy the city's requirements of maximizing the use of that land, right? The 5 they are going to build on, my example, so it has to be built at the minimum density, so not like we're wasting land, right? In effect, not wasting the use of land. We're just permitting the landowner the rights I think a landowner has to say, you know what, these 5 I want to build on, and say these 5 I want to leave natural. So,
yeah, I would like to request that when Jessica gives her presentation, that she, if possible, present some alternatives to this language and other ways to deal with this. So, Paul, you say there are other tools in the toolbox that could be used. It would be nice if we could be given a presentation of what some of the alternatives could be.
We can certainly do that. Do other councilors, and Councilor Chalnick, I think you described a sort of goal that that you would have in mind, which would be that what if somebody wanted to only build on a portion for a period of time? Are there other goals that councilors would like commissioners to think about as they come up with this? Because obviously there's innumerable things that could be done. Finding what the goals are behind them is sort of the key to that. That's helpful, Councilor Chalnick, to hear that perspective. Do others have something that you'd like the commission to chew on as outcomes?
Sorry, Paul, I feel like we're getting a little confused in the process question here. I think some
Right.
councilors are saying, let's move to a public hearing and have Jessica explain things. And some councilors are saying, ask the commission to look at a very specific thing. And I'm not sure we've determined yet which of those two paths the council is planning on going down.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Mike, you have a comment?
Yes, I think obviously, as we've heard here from some of our colleagues and some people in the public, that there are going to be comments and suggestions that will come forward. I think in terms of just efficiency of staff time used, that I would encourage us to go forward with a public reading or hearing to basically, for the sake of the staff, to try to get as broad, and for the sake of us, to get as broad a feedback on the documents and what things may need to be relooked at or tweaked. If Jessica can, in this particular case, add, as you had suggested, Paul, alternative language as a suggestion that may help inform the public discussion. But I think just in this terms of efficiencies, I think we should get this out to the public as a point of principle, and just to be as effective as possible. Because I also have, separate from this, I just had some questions, if you could explain a little bit, or perhaps just if you think it's best, that way to hear from the more in-depth briefing on the 16th on the sort of neighborhood commercial activity, limited neighborhood commercial activity. I did set in on some of the planning commissions, and I'll be honest, with every sort of proposed commercial activity option, there was always a concern expressed about what that would mean in terms of noise, what would that mean in terms of traffic, and I guess I just wanted a sort of clearer sense, or will that come in Jessica's presentation of, where did we come out on this in terms of what will realistically be possible and attractive? Just because I've seen in many other communities, these small neighborhood communities, just wonderful for many ways, getting people out of cars, greater circulation, more walking, and easier access to recreational activities. Thank you.
Was there a question in there, Mike?
Yes, yeah, my question, the one was, my question was to Paul, is it this the time for you to explain in more detail the commercial neighborhood possibilities that will be allowed, or is this something best to wait until Jessica? I fully understand, as I said initially, the goal is to have the public weigh in and for you to use this as effectively as possible, the time to look at all the options.
I mean, this is Paul. We can do either. I could give you 30 seconds now and have a more in-depth, or you could wait until the 16th to have the more in-depth. So I guess I'll leave that to you and the chair to decide how you want to spend the time.
Well, if okay, I'll wait till Jessica. In the same spirit as I think we should move this whole product to a public hearing so we can get feedback to allow you to address the various concerns that may come up in the community.
Thanks, Mike. Elizabeth?
I'm also comfortable moving it to a public hearing, anticipating that we will get additional, as a council, will get additional feedback on the items specifically that were brought up tonight, and potentially others. The one request I had, because this was linked, some things were linked to the city plan, is it possible in Jessica's presentation to highlight the city plan actions that some of the LDR changes are linked with? I guess
I think actually, Elizabeth, if you look at the parts that the report I referenced, I believe they are listed there.
Okay, great.
It tells you exactly which each LDR. I believe it lists the city plan.
Oh, perfect.
The parts of the city plan that it
great. I did not see that. Thanks, Duncan.
I believe that is the case.
That is correct, Duncan. There's a general one in the spotlight that hits one or two of them. And Councilor Fitzgerald, if you're interested, the state statutes require a planning commission report. Those are each also on the website. For each of the 10 amendments, there's a detailed report of compliance with state law, and one of them is how does it implement your plan? And so for each of those 10 amendments, there is a, as best the commission could, identifying each action that is being implemented from the city plan.
Thank you. I did
so
not
happy
see
to
that,
send those
Paul.
to you directly. They're also on the website under that same chart. It says
So I'm hearing feedback that we'd like to set a public hearing.
Planning Commission report.
I'm sorry, Paul, you were still speaking. I'm sorry. You froze up for a second. So I'm entertaining a motion to set a public hearing on the 16th.
So can I read the specific motion for you?
Sure. Who would like to make this motion after it's read? Or go ahead and read it.
I'll move for it.
Okay, you want to read it? It's right up on your screen.
I move to warn a public hearing on draft amendments to land development regulations, L.D.R 24-01 through L.D.R 24-10, inclusive of recommended changes presented in the meeting's packet for September 16th, 2024 at 7 p.m., and to file a copy of the amendments with the city clerk and the planning commission.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Mike, you raised your hand?
No, I was just seconding it, but I see it already done.
Make sure that that doesn't foreclose us from making further changes. For instance, to address the point we just, so we can do that at the public hearing, make changes, and then we would warn another public hearing potentially. Is that what we would do?
Yes.
Okay.
We're about to vote.
Yes, before you vote.
Okay, make it quick.
You vote, you've only got 30 days to make the changes, and that's going to be difficult to do. If you want the planning commission to make changes and bring them back to you, 30 days is a very, very short, and I think Councillor Charlie just hit on it to foreclose our opportunity to make the changes. I'll come back with some others.
Is that right, Jesse?
Well, one, the public hearing is within the 30 days, so you can make changes. Two, I think going to the public hearing is not sending something back to the planning commission task for something. It's keeping it with you to make those decisions. And you've given us a bunch of guidance tonight on what data you want to see, what information you want to see during that presentation to help inform those decisions.
No, but I just
So you're
want-
talking about, again, two different
No, I just want to
paths.
understand. So if we set the public hearing for September 16th, then we have only to October 16th then to make changes? Is that, just want to understand.
Paul or Colin or Jared, anyone want to weigh in on, I've never heard of this 30-day thing. Paul, are you still online?
Hi, this is Paul. No, this is Paul. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
My video got a little less weak, less strong, so I just turned off the camera. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello? Okay. No, once the council has it, you have 150 days to take action.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in the motion that I made, or in the discussion we've had, my understanding is that on the 16th, Jessica will be giving us some additional information about options on the section that we were discussing.
I just wanted to mention one thing about the language that Michael spoke of and you spoke of too, Andrew. And we've discussed this a little bit in the commission. We have a very limited amount of land that's still available for housing. And I certainly respect landowners' desire to do what they would want with that property, but there's also a healthy tension with our desire to get the most out of the land that we can. And I think that you need to look at both sides of that when you decide what information you hear from Jessica and what your decision is. Keep both sides of that in mind.
Thank you. Ready for the vote? All those in favor say aye.
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 Mike says aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've got a date. All right. We already visited item 14.
Thank you, everyone.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
Okay.
Paul.
Thank
Have
you.
a nice vacation.
Yes. Mr. Mittag, after the fact.
I just wanted to make sure you're not uncomfortable with this. Paul mentioned two circumstances. He mentioned a developer has 10 acres. The developer can do the maximum development on his 10 acres. He doesn't have to have a mandatory minimum density. He can build a TND on his 10, do whatever he can according to the zone and the rules of the TND. If it's a private landowner who wants to build only on 3 acres, the other 7 acres of his 10-acre lot can be built on in the future. If he moves or sells, it can be built on. It's not conserved in any way. But it's not. But the owner isn't forced to build 4 or 8 units per acre.
Right.
And demonstrating that the residential density is available, the landowner is required to account for rights of way, streets, stormwater practices, and required civic spaces, as well as identify all the included hazards, level 1 and level 2 resources and those kinds of things. So it's not simple. It requires a lot of work. But I wanted you to know that even if we don't have, as I hope we don't, the mandatory minimums, we could still build, the owner can still build whatever it is he or she wants. It's not cut off.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item 15, other business. Is there any other business? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Just a quick comment. The dates for the Coffee with the Counselor, the schools are reserved through mid-October. So at some point, we should just, before those dates run out, we should review if we want to continue reserving those properties for that community engagement venue.
Thanks. Item 16, possible executive session pursuant to 1 VSA A313A1B to discuss labor relations agreements with employees, specifically the SB Police Officers Association. We need a motion to go into executive session.
I move that the council make a specific finding that premature general public knowledge of confidential attorney-client communications made for the purpose of providing professional legal services to this body regarding ongoing negotiations on the employment contract between the city and the police union before the council would clearly place the public body at a substantial disadvantage.
We have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Mike, do we hear aye?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. It's unanimous.
Based on that finding, I now move that the board enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing upcoming negotiations and receive attorney-client communications with the city's attorney engaged for this purpose pursuant to 1 VSA 313A1E and F, inviting Jesse Baker, City Manager, Steve Block, Deputy City Manager, Colin McKeel, City Attorney, Jared Pellerin, Deputy City Attorney, into executive session, Sean Burke, Police Chief.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Mike?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. Thank you. And we will not be coming back after executive session.
So, Mike, I didn't realize you were going to be remote tonight.